Chapter 2239. He was really a little scared of some of Yi Xian's tricks. Yi Xian laughed. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them were about to leave. Meanwhile, Zhou Yu suddenly said, Young Master Yi, are you really going to annihilate the Shi clan? Yi Xian nodded. Zhou Yu hesitated for a moment and said, Forgive me for being blunt, but with your current strength, annihilating the Shi clan will be quite difficult. Yi Xian smiled. It's fine. We'll take it slow. If we can't annihilate them in a day, then we'll do it in 10 days. If we can't annihilate them in 10 days, then we'll do it in 10 years. One day we'll annihilate them. As soon as he finished speaking, he and Dao Ling vanished into the horizon. Zhou Yu fell silent. The Shi clan actually offended the two of them. If geniuses like Yi Xian and Dao Ling were to take revenge, then not to mention the Shi clan, even the Zhou clan would have a headache. The two of them would run if they couldn't win, cultivate for a few days and then come back to fight again. Who would be able to endure that? After a long time, Zhou Yu shook his head and left. The fact that Yi Xian and Dao Ling were taking revenge on the Shi clan was undoubtedly a good thing for the Zhou clan. No matter who won in the end, the Zhou clan just had to wait and see, and they would be able to reap the benefits. In the distant starry sky, Yi Xian and Dao Ling stopped, and then Yi Xian brought Dao Ling to Xiaota. Yi Xian and Dao Ling sat facing each other. They were exchanging battle experiences and thoughts. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. What do you think about the battle with the Shi clan? Dao Ling pondered for a moment and said, The river of time is the key. Yi Xian nodded. Exactly as I thought. Time realm. Is the core time energy? No. Is the river of time just like the river of time? They're already able to touch the river of time, and it can be said to be the source of power for time realm experts. Because the time energy used by time realm experts is extracted from the river of time. Dao Ling suddenly said, The strength of a time realm powerhouse depends on how much time energy he can extract from the river of time. Even we are unfamiliar with the river of time. Unfamiliar? Yi Xian nodded. Although they had reached the time realm, they weren't extracting time power from the river of time. Rather, they were extracting time power from the river of time. Dao Ling suddenly said, My guess is that the river of time is like a huge ocean and cultivators are like the fish and prawns in the ocean. If we can enter the ocean, we will be able to obtain the power of the river of time. With that, the two of them looked at each other. In the next moment, the two of them left Xiaota and arrived at a starry sky. Both of them slowly closed their eyes and started to sense the river of time through the time energy. It didn't take long for both of them to sense the river of time. However, they were shocked to discover that the river of time was emitting a terrifying force. This force was so strong that even they didn't dare to approach it. The power of time. That was the power of time emitted by the river of time. At that moment, both of them were extremely shocked. Power. The power of time emitted by the river of time was too terrifying. It was many times stronger than their own power of time. The two of them looked at each other with shock in their eyes. Dao Ling suddenly smiled bitterly. It seems that we have to absorb the power of time from the river of time bit by bit. Only when we are strong enough can we try to enter the river of time. To do that, we will need at least a few hundred years. Yi Xian suddenly said, 100 years? Dao Ling nodded. Yi Xian shook his head and grabbed Dao Ling's shoulder. In the next moment, he and Dao Ling disappeared on the spot. In an instant, Yi Xian and Dao Ling ignored the terrifying power of time and entered the river of time. After entering the river of time, Dao Ling was dumbfounded. Dao Ling looked at Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, Brother Yi, this? Then he suddenly looked at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand and said, It's because of this sword, right? Yi Xian said with a straight face, No, it's because of me. Dao Ling's face darkened. Brother Yi, don't be like that. I'm not blind. Yi Xian was speechless. Dao Ling looked at the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand and sighed, Brother Yi, it is extremely difficult for ordinary people to enter the river of time. But you can easily enter the river of time. This is a bit too much. Yi Xian was about to speak, but Dao Ling suddenly laughed and said, But I like it, ha. Yi Xian was speechless. Dao Ling looked around. At that moment, he and Yi Xian were in the depths of the river of time. The river of time was so long that it seemed endless. In this long river, the power of time could only be described as terrifying. It was too terrifying. The bit of time energy they cultivated was simply insignificant when compared to the power of time within the river of time. Yi Xian's right hand swept lightly through the battlefield. As his hand passed through the power of time, he had to admit that he was quite shocked. The power of time was truly terrifying. After the passage of time, it was the passage of time, and the passage of time had lasted for countless trillions of years. Dao Ling suddenly pointed towards the distance. Brother Yi, look. Yi Xian raised his head and looked into the distance. At the end of their field of vision, they saw some shadows within the river of time, and those shadows were walking through the river of time and moving towards the distance. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What's that? Dao Ling shook his head. I don't know. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, let's go and take a look. Dao Ling nodded, all right. But he didn't move. Yi Xian gazed at Dao Ling, but Dao Ling didn't speak. Yi Xian was quite speechless. Let's go. Dao Ling nodded, all right. But he didn't move. Yi Xian was speechless. Xiao Ta suddenly said, both of you are at the time realm at any rate, and you're amongst the supreme experts of the world. Do you have to be so cowardly? Dao Ling hurriedly shook his head. We have to keep a low profile. Before he attained the time realm, he felt that the time realm was very formidable. But after he attained the time realm, he realized that he was still very weak. Of course, the main reason was because of the sword that Yi Xian's younger sister had given him. That sword had caused him to doubt his life. The slightest bit of arrogance he'd had was instantly extinguished by that sword. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, those shadows are quite strange. Dao Ling looked at those shadows and frowned slightly. Yi Xian suddenly said, let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Dao Ling hurriedly followed him as well. It didn't take long for the two of them to arrive in front of that shadow. Meanwhile, the shadow had gradually condensed into a walking middle-aged man. But the two of them couldn't sense any aura from the middle-aged man at all. The middle-aged man walked into the distance. His gaze was calm and his steps were very steady. Yi Xian suddenly said in a deep voice, he's someone from the past. He's just left behind an illusion of himself in the river of time. Someone from the past. Dao Ling frowned slightly. Why do you say so? Yi Xian said, I guessed. Dao Ling. At this moment, the middle-aged man suddenly stopped and turned to look at Yi Xian and Dao Ling. Yi Xian and Dao Ling's expressions changed slightly. Dao Ling hurriedly said, Brother Yi, he's looking at us. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, he's looking at us from the past. The middle-aged man suddenly smiled and said, interesting. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. Senior, am I right? The middle-aged man smiled and said, yes. The me you see now belongs to the me from a very, very long time ago. Dao Ling was a little curious. How long ago? The middle-aged man smiled slightly. It should be tens of billions of years ago. Dao Ling. The middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and Dao Ling and then he said, the two of you are very outstanding. But under normal circumstances, the two of you shouldn't be able to enter the river of time. As he spoke, his gaze descended onto the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw the green profound sword. In the next moment, his pupils constricted. This. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, and then he passed the green profound sword to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man looked at the green profound sword, and his gaze gradually became slightly dazed. A moment later, he smiled bitterly. How terrifying. Yi Xian asked, what's wrong? The middle-aged man took a deep look at Yi Xian. My young friend, you're really not simple. You actually have such a peerless expert protecting you. I'm really envious. As she spoke, she paused for a moment and said, the person who created this sword is a time immortal, right? Yi Xian frowned slightly. A time immortal? A trace of surprise flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes. You don't know? Yi Xian nodded. I don't. The middle-aged man smiled. After traversing the mortal world and arriving at the other side, one is an immortal, a time immortal. Time immortals don't affect their bodies and their lifespan is endless. Yi Xian fell silent. The middle-aged man asked. The creator of this sword actually fused the power of time into the sword and suppressed the power of time. Such strength means that the creator has surpassed the power of time. To be able to do this, I believe only a time immortal would be able to do it. Yi Xian shook his head. She probably isn't a time immortal. A trace of surprise flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes. She isn't? Yi Xian nodded. She doesn't cultivate. The middle-aged man fell silent for a moment before he said, no. Yi Xian gazed at the middle-aged man and the middle-aged man spoke softly, realm is just a name. She doesn't cultivate because she has already broken free of this restriction. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Break free of the restriction? The middle-aged man smiled. Actually, we are constantly breaking free of the restriction throughout our lives. What is the restriction? It is the various rules, restrictions and restraints. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, I've broken free of many restrictions as well. The middle-aged man shook his head and smiled. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Please guide me, senior. The middle-aged man smiled. Even a time immortal is still within the restriction. If you can't break free of fate and karma, if you can't break free of space and universe, if you can't break free of time and samsara, if you can't break free of creation in heaven and earth, you will forever be within the restriction. Yi Xian frowned slightly. How do I break free? The middle-aged man was quite helpless. If I knew, why would I be wasting time with you? Is it fun? Yi Xian, the middle-aged man suddenly said, young friend, can I have a look at your sword? Yi Xian smiled. Of course. As he spoke, he handed the sword to the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man took the sword, and the next moment he disappeared with the green profound sword. Yi Xian and Dao Ling were dumbfounded. The two looked at each other and then said in unison, F***CK. Ran away. Have I been F***King tricked? Yi Xian had a mental breakdown. Chapter 2240. Needless to say, Yi Xian and Dao Ling were truly dumbfounded. They really ran away. How could this be? Damn it. Neither of them had expected that the middle-aged man who seemed like a nice guy would actually lie. How careless. However, both of them were puzzled. Wasn't he someone from the past? How could he take the sword away? They didn't have time to think about it, because once the sword was gone, they couldn't resist the energy of time any longer, and it was about to destroy them. They hurriedly left the river of time. After they left, their bodies had actually rotted away. Both of them broke out in cold sweat when they witnessed this scene. We were almost finished. Meanwhile, Dao Ling suddenly spoke solemnly, how shameless of you to play dirty. How utterly shameless. Yi Xian's expression was quite unsightly as well. Damn it. He hadn't expected them to play dirty right away. What the hell? How could they be so shameless? Dao Ling suddenly said, Brother Yi, what do we do now? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, let me take a look first. As he spoke, he slowly closed his eyes. It was time to sense the sword. A short moment later, Yi Xian's expression was quite unsightly, because he noticed that he couldn't sense the sword at all. Perhaps it was too far away. Yi Xian's expression was gloomy. Dao Ling suddenly said, Brother Yi, do you have a way? Yi Xian shook his head. We can't defeat that bastard. Since he was able to move freely through the river of time, it was obvious that his strength was absolutely terrifying. Yi Xian fell silent for a short moment before he said, we have to get help. Dao Ling asked, who? Yi Xian spoke solemnly, Miss Qing Guan. He still didn't want to get help from Qing Er. He felt bad for troubling Qing Er for something like this. Moreover, it wouldn't be easy to clean up the mess if Qing Er showed up. Yi Xian withdrew the Dark Heaven token and activated it. It didn't take long for the token to tremble slightly, and then space before him split apart before an old man walked out. It was still that masked old man. The masked old man glanced at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, what's the matter? He was actually a little afraid of Yi Xian. Some of the things this guy did were really inhumane. Yi Xian smiled. I want to talk to Miss Qing Guan. The masked old man thought for a moment before nodding. All right. After saying that, he opened his palm and a white light suddenly flew up. Soon, a screen appeared in the sky and a virtual image appeared. The virtual image gradually solidified and soon Qing Guan appeared on the screen. At that moment, Qing Guan was standing on an unknown island. Not too far away from him sat an old man. Next to the old man was a woman who had appeared before. She was none other than the woman who had held the sickle. The three seemed to be discussing something. Qing Guan suddenly turned her head. When she saw Yi Xian, she was slightly surprised and then she smiled and said, Young Master Yi, what's the matter? The woman with the sickle and the old man were also looking at Yi Xian, and their eyes were filled with curiosity. Yi Xian said seriously, Qing Guan, I need your help with something. Qing Guan smiled, what is it? Yi Xian explained what had happened. After hearing Yi Xian's words, Qing Guan frowned slightly. In the river of time? Yi Xian nodded. Qing Guan thought for a moment and said, it should be a time walker. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly, a time walker? Qing Guan nodded, a group of ancient cultivators. They walk through the passage of time. They aren't at the time realm, but they've grasped the energy of time. They're a group of cultivators that have existed for a very long time. They don't pay attention to their cultivation, and they specialize in studying the river of time. All those who attain the Pramitha realm are called time immortals. When she spoke up to this point, she gazed at Yi Xian. Do you know what that person looks like? Yi Xian nodded and then he waved his right hand lightly. The middle-aged man's appearance appeared before him. Qin Guan glanced at the middle-aged man and said, "Wait a moment for me." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around to gaze at the woman with the sickle and the old man. "I'm going to do something. Wait for me. Is that all right?" The woman with the sickle grinned. "Pavilion Master Qin Guan, do you need help? I can help you fight for free." Qin Guan thought for a moment and said, "All right." As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and a spatial ring appeared before the woman with the sickle. There were 300,000 universe veins within the spatial ring. 300,000 universe veins. The woman's eyelids twitched when she witnessed this scene, and she hurriedly put the spatial ring away. "Thank you, Pavilion Master Qin Guan." Meanwhile, the old man suddenly slapped the table. "How presumptuous! You actually dared to bully Pavilion Master Qin's friend. Pavilion Master Qin, I'll help you fight for free as well. Moreover, I'm willing to fight until my last breath for Pavilion Master Qin's friend." Qin Guan grinned. "Thank you." As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and a spatial ring flew over to the old man. It was 300,000 universe veins as well. The old man hurriedly put it away and he was quite excited. Experts like them needed universe veins like how ordinary people in the mortal world needed air. They were indispensable. But universe veins were truly too difficult to obtain. The formation of a universe vein represented a universe. So, if they wanted to obtain universe veins, they had to ceaselessly travel about. Meanwhile, Qin Guan suddenly said, "Let's go." As soon as they finished speaking, the three of them vanished on the spot. When they reappeared, they were in front of Yi Xian and Dao Ling. Qin Guan smiled. "Let's go. Let's go find him." As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yi Xian and Dao Ling into the River of Time. After they entered the River of Time, a Tai Chi diagram appeared beneath Yi Xian and Dao Ling's feet. Under the protection of the Tai Chi diagram, the two of them actually disregarded the surrounding energy of time. As for the old man and the woman with the sickle, they actually disregarded the surrounding energy of time as well. Under Qin Guan's lead, they walked towards the distance. Yi Xian was suddenly curious. "Qin Guan, what's that beneath our feet?" Qin Guan said, "A Tai Chi circle." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "A Tai Chi circle?" Qin Guan nodded. "I created it myself. As of now, its defense is considered to be the second best in the entire universe." Dao Ling suddenly asked, "What's the first?" Qin Guan smiled. "The body of the Milky Way's area. Her body can't be broken without 3 swords. Even if it's 3 swords, she can still withstand 1 sword without dying." Dao Ling was a little puzzled. "Miss Qin Guan, what are the 3 swords?" Qin Guan glanced at Yi Xian, smiled. "His sister, his father, and his big brother." Yi Xian was speechless. Dao Ling's expression froze. He gulped, then turned to look at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, are you a second-generation heir?" Yi Xian said calmly, "No." Dao Ling was speechless. Qin Guan suddenly smiled. "Young Master Yi, you're walking faster than I imagined. I can't believe you're able to come into contact with the River of Time so quickly. I have to say your speed is pretty good." Yi Xian smiled. "Qin Guan, what have you been busy with recently?" Qin Guan blinked. "Some things. It's not convenient for me to tell you." Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, the woman with the sickle suddenly said, "Pavilion Master Qin, we have to be careful." Qin Guan looked at the woman with the sickle, and the woman with the sickle said in a deep voice, "These time cultivators are not simple, and they all have strange tempers." Qin Guan smiled. "It's okay. We'll use peaceful means before resorting to force." The woman with the sickle glanced at Qin Guan, then nodded slightly. Soon they saw an ancient city at the end of their sight. Yi Xian frowned. "There's a city here?" Qin Guan smiled. "This River of Time is equivalent to a universe. Moreover, not all places in this River of Time are filled with the power of time. Cities can be built in places without the power of time." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I see." Qin Guan and the others arrived at the city, and at this time an old man in a gray robe suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the others. The old man glanced at Qin Guan and the others. "What's up?" Qin Guan smiled. "I'm looking for someone." The old man's face was expressionless. "The person you're looking for is not here." Yi Xian pulled Qin Guan's sleeve and then said, "They don't know you?" Qin Guan rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. "I'm very low-key." "Yi Xian." Qin Guan looked at the old man and smiled. "Someone here took my friend's sword. You ask him to return it and apologize, and I'll call the shots on this matter." The old man looked at Qin Guan. "Leave immediately if you don't want to die." Qin Guan suddenly pulled out a gun, then pulled the trigger. Bang! A ray of white light surged out. The old man's pupils constricted. and he hurriedly raised his arms to block it. Rumble. A ray of white light exploded, and the old man retreated explosively. As he retreated, his body was obliterated inch by inch, and it was completely gone by the time he reached the city wall. Moreover, his soul was extremely illusory. This shot had almost obliterated him. The woman with the sickle and the old man gulped, and there was a trace of shock in their eyes. Damn it. This pavilion master Qin is quite terrifying. After all, he's a time cultivator. He was almost killed by a single shot just like that. At this moment the old man was completely stunned. His body is gone. Qin Guan spoke indifferently from afar, "Geezer, be polite." The old man was speechless. Meanwhile, Qin Guan pointed his gun at the old man. "Where's that person? Ask him to come out." The old man hurriedly said, "Who is he?" Qin Guan turned to gaze at Yi Xian. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Can't you condense an image?" Qin Guan glared at Yi Xian. "I've told you many times. I don't cultivate. I don't have any strength at all." All of them almost had a mental breakdown when they heard this. "Fuck. You don't cultivate. You're even more terrifying than cultivating." Yi Xian was quite speechless as well. He waved his right hand and the middle-aged man's appearance appeared here. The old man was first stunned when he saw the middle-aged man, and then he said, "Everyone, he isn't in our city." Qin Guan frowned slightly. "He isn't in your city?" The old man hurriedly nodded, "Yes. He's in Time City and he's quite a distance away from us." Qin Guan glanced at the old man, and then he put his gun away with slight displeasure. "Since he isn't here, then why are you being so fierce?" The old man hesitated for a moment and then his voice trembled. "I didn't know you were so formidable." All of them were speechless. P.S. Can you not use vulgarities when you're insulting others? Chapter 2241. At this moment the old man felt slightly aggrieved. He really hadn't expected this woman to be so terrifying. She'd almost killed him with a single move. After all, he was a time walker. However, he hadn't even been able to resist that attack. It was truly terrifying. Qin Guan suddenly opened his palm, and a spatial ring flew over to the old man. The old man glanced at it and he was stunned in the next moment. There were actually 10,000 universe veins in the spatial ring. The old man looked at Qin Guan. "This," Yi Xian blinked, "help us find that person. And 100,000 more." The old man's voice trembled. "Really?" Qin Guan nodded, "Yes." The old man said hurriedly, "Young miss, let's go. This old man will take you there." As soon as he finished speaking, he put away the spatial ring and led Qin Guan and the others towards Time City. Yi Xian and Dao Ling exchanged glances. This old man actually had no principles at all. His body had just been shattered by Qin Guan, yet he was lowering his head now. How unprincipled. On the way, Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Qin Guan, that person said he was in the past. But how could he take my things now?" Qin Guan smiled, "Because his main body is here. Otherwise no one would be able to do that." Yi Xian nodded, "I understand." It didn't take long for them to arrive at Time City. As soon as they arrived, the old man hurriedly said, "White Sage, someone is looking for you." After a moment of silence, a middle-aged man suddenly walked out from within Time City. Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. This was the person who'd held his sword earlier. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. "Everyone, why are you looking for me?" Qin Guan smiled, "You're the one who took my friend's things?" White Sage frowned, "What things?" "Young miss, I don't understand what you're talking about." Qin Guan gazed at White Sage. "Take them out now and apologize and I won't hit you." White Sage narrowed his eyes. "Woman, are you threatening me?" The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "Saint White, be a little more polite when you speak." A hint of disdain appeared at the corners of White Sage's mouth. "Be polite? It depends on the person, doesn't it?" Qin Guan nodded slightly and took out a gun. The next moment she pulled the trigger. Boom. A white light suddenly surged out. In the distance, White Saint's expression changed abruptly. He folded his hands together and in an instant, tens of thousands of illusory mountains enveloped him. A powerful pressure swept out in all directions, incomparably terrifying. Rumble. In front of everyone's eyes, the tens of thousands of mountains shattered, and the white light blasted onto White Saint's body. Rumble. Saint White was instantly blasted hundreds of thousands of feet away. As soon as he came to a stop, his physical body shattered. Sage White was dumbfounded. The old man sighed in his heart. "This idiot. I told you to speak politely, but you just had to act cool. Is this good? His physical body is gone, right? In the distance, White Sage gazed at Qin Guan with disbelief, and he said with a trembling voice, What is that thing? Qin Guan spoke indifferently, hand it over. White Sage gulped and then he asked, What exactly is that? Qin Guan frowned slightly, and then she pointed her gun at White Sage. White Sage's expression instantly changed and he hurriedly said, That sword isn't with me. Qin Guan was slightly displeased. Are you wasting my time? White Sage hurriedly said, That sword is in the hands of my Time sect master. They're studying it. The Time sect. Qin Guan turned to look at the old man. The old man hesitated for a moment before he said, The Time sect is the #1 extraordinary power in the River of Time. Everyone in it is a time walker. Qin Guan gazed at White Sage. Ask your sect master to come out. White Sage hesitated for a moment before he said, Come with me. As soon as he finished speaking, he transformed into a ray of light that floated into the city. Qin Guan was about to walk over when the woman hurriedly said, Pavilion Master Qin, I'm afraid it's a trap. Qin Guan blinked. It better not be. Otherwise I'll raze Time City to the ground. The woman with the sickle was speechless. It didn't take long for them to enter Time City. As soon as they entered, numerous terrifying pillars of light suddenly arose from the surroundings. A grand formation. The two of them instantly became vigilant. Qin Guan's brows knit together once more. Meanwhile, White Sage appeared once more, and there was a white-clothed old man in front of him. The white-clothed old man gazed at Qin Guan. I'm the sect master of the Time sect. May I know your name? Qin Guan spoke indifferently, Qin Guan. The old man frowned slightly. I've never heard of you. Qin Guan shook his head slightly. Give that sword back to me. The old man stared at Qin Guan. What if I say no? Qin Guan sighed softly. She turned to look at Yi Xian with a puzzled expression. Why? Yi Xian was stunned. What do you mean why? Qin Guan shook her head. Why don't they listen to me every time I speak to them nicely? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, Next time, fire your spear before you speak to them. They should listen. Qin Guan nodded. That makes sense. At this moment, the Time sect master suddenly said, Your Excellency, this matter has nothing to do with you. Why do you have to stand out? Qin Guan looked at the Time sect master. You should be glad that he came to me. If he came to find someone else, the River of Time would be gone. The Time sect master frowned. What do you mean? Qin Guan shook her head. Don't waste time. As she spoke, she pointed her spear at the Time sect master. The latter's eyes narrowed slightly, and he suddenly vanished on the spot. Bang. A terrifying aura suddenly swept towards Qin Guan. He wanted to take the initiative to gain the upper hand. At this moment, Qin Guan suddenly pulled the trigger, and a white light surged out from the muzzle. Rumble. In front of Qin Guan, an afterimage retreated madly. This retreat was several tens of thousands of zhang away. It was the Time sect master. After the Time sect master stopped, the space-time he was in turned pitch black. However, his physical body did not shatter. He had withstood it. Beside Qin Guan, the scythe-wielding woman and the old man beside her exchanged a glance. A trace of shock could be seen in their eyes. This Time sect master was quite powerful. In the distance, the Time sect master raised his head and looked at Qin Guan. There was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. What are you holding? Qin Guan's face was expressionless. She placed the spear back into the small pouch, but in the next moment she took out a round object that looked like an egg. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this and he was about to retreat. Right at this moment, Qin Guan suddenly smiled and said, Don't be afraid. You have my Tai Chi ring to protect you. It'll be fine. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then he said, Really? Qin Guan nodded, and then she looked at the Time sect master. Come try its power. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly tossed it away, and then she covered her ears with both hands. Everyone, in the distance, the Time sect master's pupils constricted. He suddenly pressed his palms together and roared furiously, Time Divine Palm. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slapped his palms forward. Bang. A terrifying time energy suddenly swept out from his palms, and then a huge palm print that was over 30,000 zhang long smashed directly towards the egg that Qin Guan had tossed out. Meanwhile, Qin Guan turned around to look at Yi Xian. Cover your ears. Yi Xian hurriedly did as he was told. Rumble. Suddenly, a world-shaking explosion resounded. At this moment, everyone within the River of Time heard this explosion, and countless experts actually started bleeding from all 7 apertures. As the explosion resounded, a mushroom cloud that was hundreds of thousands of meters tall suddenly rose into the air. In an instant, the entire time city was transformed into nothingness. Moreover, the boundless energy of time was shattered and obliterated at this moment. At this moment, the entire river of time was trembling like the ground was quaking. On the other hand, Yi Xian, Dao Ling and the others were fine. Because the Tai Chi rings beneath their feet had actually forcefully blocked all the terrifying energy that had erupted from the explosion. The entire city of time had been completely obliterated. Countless experts within the city had either perished on the spot or been heavily injured. Everyone was stunned. As for the Time Sect Master and White Saint, they were still alive. The Time Sect Master's physical body had completely disappeared, and his soul was almost transparent. As for White Saint, he had been hiding behind the Time Sect Master just now. Thus he had luckily escaped this calamity. That was because the Time Sect Master had used all his strength to block the power of the thing that Qingguan had thrown out. At this moment both of them were completely dumbfounded. Especially the Time Sect Master. He felt that his brain was not enough to process this. What was that thing just now? Qingguan looked at the Time Sect Master and took out another "Don't Provoke Me" pill from his cloth bag. Seeing this, the Time Sect Master and White Saint's expressions changed drastically. The Time Sect Master hurriedly said, "Your Excellency, that sword we will return." Qingguan frowned slightly. "Wouldn't it have been better if you had said so earlier? What's the point of forcing me to use force?" The Time Sect Master's expression froze. "Damn it. This daddy didn't know you were so powerful. If I had known you were so powerful, how would I have dared to attack you?" At this moment he finally understood. The person in front of him was someone he could not afford to offend. Qingguan spoke indifferently, "Take it out." The Time Sect Master hesitated for a moment before he said, "That sword isn't in my possession." Qingguan flared up with rage when she heard this. "Are all of you playing tricks on me?" As soon as she finished speaking, she took out over 10 "Don't Provoke Me" pills from her cloth bag. The expressions of Yi Xian and the others changed when they witnessed this scene. Damn it. Not to mention the Time Sect Master, even they were slightly afraid of it. A single pill was already so terrifying, so what if a dozen were to explode at the same time? They didn't dare to imagine it. It was too terrifying. The Time Sect Master was terrified out of his wits and he hurriedly said, "Miss, don't be angry. That sword is in the hands of a half-step time immortal of my time sect, and he's not too far away." Qingguan's expression was quite unsightly. The Time Sect Master hesitated for a moment before he said, "Miss, should I go get him?" Qingguan's face was expressionless. "He's already gone." The Time Sect Master was stunned. Meanwhile, Qingguan suddenly said, "Someone." As soon as he finished speaking, the masked old man suddenly appeared by Qingguan's side. Qingguan spoke indifferently, "Issue a wanted order. I want the head of that half-step time immortal and 1,000,000 universe veins." The masked old man hesitated for a moment before he nodded. "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished without a trace. The Time Sect Master hesitated for a moment before he said, "Miss, that's useless. That senior is a half-step time immortal, and not many people in this world can kill him. Even if..." Suddenly the space above them split apart, and then a bloody head and a sword slowly drifted out from within it. The Time Sect Master's pupils constricted, and he retreated repeatedly while his eyes were filled with shock. That head belonged to that half-step time immortal he spoke of. Yi Xian and the others were stunned as well. Is this the power of money? All of them were speechless. Chapter 2242. Needless to say, everyone here was completely stunned when they saw that head and sword appear. How long has it been? Less than 10 minutes? Meanwhile, an extremely blurry figure appeared not too far away from them. The expressions of all the experts here changed violently when they saw that figure. Danger. That was what they felt at this moment. Especially the sect master of the Time Sect. He had an extremely solemn expression on his face, and there was even terror in his eyes. A half-step time immortal was instantly killed just like that? In the distance, the figure looked at Qingguan without saying a word. Qingguan opened her palm and a spatial ring flew over to the figure. The figure took the spatial ring and said, "Thank you." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. He hadn't taken a few steps when he suddenly stopped and said, "Pavilion Master Qin, do you have anyone else you want to kill? The price is negotiable." All the others were speechless. Qin Guan smiled, "Not for now." The figure nodded slightly and then he vanished on the spot. Qin Guan opened her palm, and the sword flew into her grasp. After that she returned it to Yi Xian. Yi Xian took it and then he gazed at Saint White. The latter's expression changed and he hurriedly said, "It's a misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding." Meanwhile, Qin Guan suddenly withdrew her gun and pulled the trigger. Bang! Saint White wasn't even able to react before he was obliterated. The expression of the sect master of the time sect instantly changed drastically, and he turned around to flee. Meanwhile, Qin Guan fired once more. Rumble. The sect master of the time sect was blasted into nothingness by a ray of white light. Instant annihilation. Qin Guan put her gun away and said, "Let's go." All of them left. The time sect had been destroyed. Right when they were about to leave the river of time, she suddenly stopped, and then her brows knit together slightly as she turned around to look towards a certain direction. Yi Xian was quite curious as he stood by Qin Guan's side. "There's someone there?" Qin Guan nodded. "There's a time immortal." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "A time immortal?" Qin Guan nodded. "A time immortal is quite formidable. Their body, heart, and soul have been tempered by the passage of time, and they're practically unaffected by it. So long as they don't court death, then they're practically unkillable." Yi Xian was quite curious. "What about that mysterious person from before?" Qin Guan smiled. "God Master Pardon doesn't cultivate the Tao of time but something else. He should be on par with the time immortal." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "You are practicing another type?" Qin Guan nodded. "There are many different types of cultivation paths in the world. The Tao of time is only one of them. There are many other types of cultivation paths. For example, there are some people who only cultivate the sword. Other than the sword, they don't care about anything else. However, when they cultivate the Tao of the sword to the pinnacle, they can use a single sword to destroy all sorts of techniques and Taos. There are also some like martial arts. Some people practice martial arts and don't cultivate their realms, but she can reach the divine in martial arts and is invincible in her generation." Yi Xian nodded. "I see." At this time they had left the river of time. Qin Guan looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "We're leaving." Yi Xian smiled. "Thank you." Qin Guan smiled. "It's no big deal." Then she was about to leave when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Can you give me some of your immoral martial pills? I need them for self-defense." Qin Guan rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. "No." Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but Qin Guan took the scythe-wielding woman and the old man and disappeared at the end of the horizon. Yi Xian thought to himself that it was a pity. The power of that disregard for martial virtue was really extraordinary. At this time Dao Ling suddenly said, "It's good to be rich." Yi Xian was silent. He had to admit that it was good to be rich. If he had enough money he could kill anyone. Time veins. Even a terrifying expert like the Time Immortal couldn't resist the temptation of time veins. Dao Ling suddenly said, "Brother Yi, are we still going to the Shi clan?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Dao Ling hesitated and then said, "What if we can't beat them?" Yi Xian glanced at Dao Ling. "Run." Dao Ling. Moments later the two of them disappeared. 2 hours later the two of them killed their way to the Shi clan. When he saw Yi Xian and Dao Ling coming to the Shi clan again, Shi Qian's face instantly turned ugly. "They're here again." Yi Xian and Dao Ling exchanged a glance. In the next moment Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the green profound sword shot into the sky. Then a 30,000-meter-long sword chi slashed down from the sky. The sword chi slashed down and tore everything apart. Meanwhile, Dao Ling suddenly leaped up and activated his Dharma idol. He clenched his right fist and punched down at the Shi clan. Bang! A terrifying force swept down from the sky, and it seemed as if it wanted to shatter the heavens and the earth. It was extremely terrifying. After releasing these two terrifying attacks, the two of them turned around and fled. They were gone. Down below, the expressions of Shi Qian and the others were extremely unsightly. Shi Qian said ferociously, "Attack." As soon as he spoke, numerous powerful time realm experts shot into the sky and met the sword chi and the punch head-on. Rumble. In next to no time, the space above the Shi clan directly exploded apart, and two terrifying forces swept through the surroundings. The entire sky above the Shi clan was in a mess. After a long time, the sky above the Shi clan finally returned to normal. However, Yi Xian and Dao Ling were nowhere to be found. All of them instantly became excited when they heard this. Only monstrous geniuses can deal with monstrous geniuses. Meanwhile, an old man suddenly said, "I've found him." However, Shi Qian spoke softly, is he unwilling to return? The old man replied, he's breaking through. Breaking through? Shi Qian was stunned and then he said, hasn't he attained the age realm? When he spoke up to this point, he suddenly turned around to gaze at the old man, and his voice trembled as he spoke. He's still breaking through despite being at the age realm? The old man nodded. Yes. Shi Qian suddenly roared with laughter. The heavens haven't destroyed my Shi clan. The heavens haven't destroyed my Shi clan. Ah. All the experts of the Shi clan started laughing as well, and the gloominess from before had been swept away. Needless to say, they really were quite afraid of Yi Xian and Dao Ling. Both of them were extraordinary monstrous geniuses. If they continued to target the Shi clan, then it would truly be quite difficult for them to resist. Moreover, their natural talent was so terrifying, and they would only grow stronger if the battle continued. Fortunately, the Shi clan had Shi Tian. Meanwhile, Shi Qian suddenly said, come, let's go see Shi Tian. As soon as he finished speaking, he led the experts of the Shi clan along and vanished on the spot. On the other side of the starry sky, Yi Xian and Dao Ling had stopped, and then they turned around to make sure that the experts of the Shi clan weren't pursuing them. After that, they immediately entered Xiao Ta's body. Dao Ling spoke solemnly, the Shi clan actually didn't pursue them. Yi Xian chuckled, they aren't stupid after all. Dao Ling gazed at Yi Xian, Brother Yi, what do you plan to do next? Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, we still have to develop for a while. Dao Ling hurriedly nodded, right? Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and then a spatial ring flew over to Dao Ling. There were 10,000 universe veins within the spatial ring. Dao Ling glanced at Yi Xian and then he instantly started laughing, Brother Yi, how could I accept this? As he spoke, he hurriedly put away the spatial ring. Yi Xian was a little speechless and then he said seriously, if we want to cultivate, we have to first get more universe veins. Dao Ling nodded in agreement. After reaching the time realm, their need for universe veins was simply too great. Even if they wanted to cultivate, they couldn't do it without universe veins. Moreover, after every battle they had to absorb universe veins to recover. Without universe veins it was simply too difficult. Yi Xian said softly, I have an idea. Dao Ling hurriedly said, all right. Yi Xian looked at Dao Ling, you didn't even ask me what the idea is before you agreed? Dao Ling said seriously, the idea that Brother Yi came up with is definitely excellent. In any case, whatever you say will do. You come up with the brains and I'll put in the effort. Both of us brothers will get rich together, big money. Yi Xian. P.S. Sorry, something happened in the morning that delayed the update. There's one more thing. Please forgive me. Chapter 2243. 2 hours later, Yi Xian and Dao Ling arrived at a branch of the Celestial Treasure Pavilion in the Universe of Universe. If he wanted time veins, then he had to go to the Celestial Treasure Pavilion. As soon as he arrived, the masked old man appeared before him. Yi Xian was slightly stunned and then he said, Senior? The old man said, Young Master Yi, did you come for time veins? Yi Xian nodded. The old man hesitated for a moment and said, Young Master Yi, the pavilion master has time veins. We don't have them as well. If you want them, then you can go look for the pavilion master. He didn't want to deal with Yi Xian anymore. He was too sly. Yi Xian smiled, Senior, you've misunderstood. I'm here to sell my blood. Hearing this, the masked elder was stunned. Dao Ling, who was beside him, was also stunned. Yi Xian opened his palm, and a drop of blood essence floated out. Yi Xian spoke seriously, Senior, how many time veins do you think I can sell this bloodline for? The masked old man fell silent for a moment before he said, Young Master Yi, your bloodline is very terrifying. But, do you really intend to sell your blood? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. Dao Ling suddenly said, Brother Yi, the method you spoke of just now was to sell your blood? Yi Xian nodded. What else? Do you think I'll change? Or rob it? Even if I do, I might not be able to win. He noticed that practically all experts who possessed time veins were at the Year Realm, and there weren't many Year Realm experts. Unless he went to rob Qingguan, then he would definitely become rich overnight. But the problem was that he couldn't win. Meanwhile, the masked old man said, Young Master Yi, do you really intend to sell your blood? Yi Xian was quite speechless. Senior, do I look like I'm joking? The masked old man hesitated for a moment and said, According to my knowledge, young Master Yi has backing. Why don't you ask for it from your family? Yi Xian instantly felt sad. Damn it. Ask my family for some? Looking for his father? Forget it. Rather than looking for his father, it was better to look for his sister. But he really didn't want to bother Qing'er with such a small matter. Moreover, Qing'er might not have it, but if he wanted it, Qing'er would definitely be able to get it. But if she did, it would probably cost someone's life. It was better to do it himself. The masked old man suddenly nodded slightly. Young Master Yi, your bloodline is very special. If you sell it, a single drop can be sold for at least 10 universe veins. Yi Xian suddenly flew into a rage. 10? Are you sure? 10. The masked old man hesitated for a moment before he said, perhaps not yet. Yi Xian's face immediately darkened. Senior, are you joking with me? The masked old man smiled bitterly. Why would I joke with you? Young Master Yi, your bloodline is indeed very special, but time veins are very rare. Let me be frank with you, our celestial treasure pavilion has less than 10,000 of them. As for some rogue time realm experts, they wouldn't have more than 10 of them. Yi Xian frowned slightly. So little? The masked old man nodded. Yes, time veins are really rare. Yi Xian and Dao Ling exchanged a glance. Zhou clan's Zhou, you had given them 20,000 at once. That was already extraordinarily generous. Yet the two of them felt that it was too little. In an instant, the two of them felt slightly ashamed. At this moment, the masked old man suddenly said, Young Master Yi, are you selling it? Yi Xian shook his head. I'm not selling it. He couldn't waste his bloodline. After all, it was his father's mad demon bloodline. Unless he had a lot of money, he would absolutely not waste it. The masked old man nodded slightly and didn't say anything else. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Senior, can't we borrow money from the Celestial Treasure Pavilion? Can I borrow some? The masked old man immediately shook his head. No. Yi Xian frowned slightly. What? The masked old man smiled bitterly. Young Master Yi, if you want time veins, you can look for the Pavilion Master. There are many Pavilion Masters. Our small branch really doesn't have many. Don't have any ideas about us. Yi Xian. After a short while, Yi Xian and Dao Ling left. The masked old man sighed softly. This young Master Yi is really pitiful. He's actually reduced to selling his blood. But why don't I feel any sympathy for him? Instead, I feel like laughing? Ah. After leaving the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, Yi Xian and Dao Ling walked through the starry sky dejectedly. Yi Xian never thought that he would be in such a difficult situation. He actually lacked money. Both of them had tried to absorb the time power of the River of Time, but they needed sufficient spiritual energy to support it. Their cultivation required a terrifying amount of spiritual energy. At this moment, they finally understood why some time realm experts found it difficult to improve. They needed money to improve. Without money, they could only slowly endure until they died. Dao Ling suddenly said, Brother Yi, what should we do? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly opened his palm and a spatial ring appeared in his hand. A profound ring. This was what his mother had left for him. Until now, he still hadn't discovered the use of this ring. Meanwhile, Xiao Ta suddenly said, Xiao Ta, you can try activating this ring. Yi Xian frowned slightly. In the next moment, the profound energy within his body surged, and the profound ring actually started to tremble slightly. Yi Xian was shocked when he saw this. What the fuck? It really works. But it didn't take long for the profound ring to become calm again. There was nothing. A wisp of confusion flashed through Yi Xian's eyes. What's going on? At this moment, the spacetime in front of Yi Xian suddenly trembled. Both Yi Xian and Dao Ling's expressions changed slightly when they witnessed this scene. Right at this moment, space suddenly split open and an old man slowly walked out. The old man had a slightly hunched back and he wore a large black robe. Moreover, he held a walking stick in his right hand. A wisp of shock flashed through both Yi Xian and Dao Ling's eyes when they saw the hunched old man. They were actually unable to sense the old man's aura. The hunched old man walked slowly towards Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Gu Chuan greets young master. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, You're one of my mother's people? Gu Chuan nodded, Yes. Yi Xian hurriedly asked, Where's my mother? Gu Chuan replied, Very far, very far. Very far. Yi Xian frowned. Meanwhile, Gu Chuan said, Master asked me to pass a message to young master. Yi Xian asked, What is it? Gu Chuan spoke solemnly, Master said that it's not good for her to interfere in the battle for karmic luck. It isn't just her, even young master's father isn't in a good position to interfere. Moreover, even though Lord Mandate of Heaven is suppressing that fellow in the Milky Way, she's only suppressing him. Because even she has no choice but to suppress him. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Gu Chuan hesitated for a moment and said, Master didn't explain in detail. She only said that it's related to you. Yi Xian fell silent. Gu Chuan continued, Master said that the battle for karmic luck is very important to you, and it's the best opportunity for you to prove yourself. Yi Xian was about to speak when space suddenly split apart. A moment later, an ocean appeared before Yi Xian's eyes, and there was a woman standing at the edge of the ocean. Qing Er's sudden appearance stunned Yi Xian. On the other hand, a wisp of fear flashed through Gu Chuan's eyes, and he bent his body and moved aside. Meanwhile, Qing Er suddenly turned around to look at Yi Xian. Are you confident in your ability to win the battle for karmic luck? Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, What will happen if I'm not? Qing Er's expression was calm. Nothing will happen. I'll kill all your opponents on your behalf. Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Dao Ling instantly broke out in cold sweat. Damn it. What the F***ck? Yi Xian laughed bitterly. That isn't a good idea, right? Qing Er gazed at Yi Xian. There's nothing bad about it. Don't listen to that young fellow's nonsense. He suffered in his past life, so he wants you to suffer just like he did. Remember, you're you and you should live according to your own thoughts. Live however you please, and I'll always be standing behind you. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Qing Er, if you do this, I'll get lazy. Qing Er said, It's okay, I'll support you. Yi Xian, Dao Ling's expression froze. At this time, Qing Er suddenly said, If you want to fight for it, you can try it yourself. Yi Xian said solemnly, I want to try it myself. Qing Er looked at Yi Xian. Are you serious? Yi Xian nodded. I'm serious. This time, I don't want you to interfere. No matter how strong the enemy is, I'll face it myself. Qing Er wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian asked, Qing Er, what are you trying to say? Qing Er thought for a moment, then said, Brother, are you sure you want to fight for it yourself? Yi Xian nodded. Everyone says that I'm the king of reliance. This time I want to fight for it myself. Qing Er nodded. Okay. Yi Xian suddenly said, I heard that you're suppressing the Daebi? Qing Er nodded. Yi Xian blinked. Is it trying to mess with me? Qing Er nodded. Sort of. Yi Xian was puzzled. What is it trying to mess with me? Qing Er said calmly, all living things have their own paths of fate. The Tao brush is only the operator of these paths of fate. It's not the controller of fate. She shook her head, then continued, a person's fate can be good or bad. It wants to manipulate your bad fate. Yi Xian was puzzled. What do you mean? Qing Er was silent. Brother, how can I explain this to you? Qing Er thought for a long time, then said, a flower has its time to bloom, but it also has its time to wither. Whether it blooms or withers, it's its fate. Yi Xian frowned. So, it wants to mess with me? Qing Er nodded. Yi Xian was furious. What the hell is it trying to do? I have no quarrel with it. Why does it want to mess with me? The Daebi was speechless. Qing Er hesitated, then said, when a flower withers, a man will die. This is in line with the Tao. All living things should be the same. In your fate there are good times and bad times. I suppressed it, not letting it run its tragic fate. Yi Xian was struck dumb. Then he said, so we broke the rules? Qing Er nodded, yes. Yi Xian's expression froze. In a small house somewhere in the Milky Way, a sorrowful voice suddenly sounded, damn it, everyone thinks I'm the bad one but they don't know I'm the victim. It's the brother and sister who broke the rules, destroyed the Tao brush. P.S. Sorry again. Next time I'll try to update the first day, or else I'll be delayed by something unexpected. Sorry. Chapter 2244. Needless to say, the brush of the great Tao was truly aggrieved right now. Just as the will of the heavens had said, everything in the world had its own destiny, and it couldn't be said to be completely predetermined. However, fate was divided into good and bad. There were good times and bad times for a person. It was the same for Yi Xian. However, the will of the heavens had suppressed it and prevented it from writing Yi Xian's bad destiny. It was like a blooming flower that didn't wither when it was time to wither. That was going against the grand Tao. However, it couldn't complain at all. Moreover, the will of the heavens made it seem like it was in the wrong. It was simply too aggrieving. Qing Er stood silently at the seaside. Her dress fluttered lightly as the sea breeze blew against her. At this moment, the world before her seemed to pale in comparison. Qing Er suddenly spoke softly, I've suppressed it, but I've changed your destiny at the same time. That's actually not very good. Because a person will only cherish sweetness after suffering in life. But in this life, I don't want you to suffer too much. Xian's heart felt slightly warm when he heard this. Needless to say, Qing'er's kindness to him was truly indescribable. As if he'd thought of something, Xian hurriedly asked, "If you hadn't interfered, then my destiny would have been predetermined by the brush of the great Tao from the beginning, right?" Qing'er shook her head. "No. The destiny of all living beings is a process and not a predetermined outcome. You have countless choices during this process, and every single one of your choices will determine your destiny in the future." She hesitated for a moment when she spoke up to this point, and then she said, "Do you understand what I mean? If you don't, then I can explain it in detail for you." Xian was speechless. Qing'er continued, "It's like two students in the mortal world. One student studies hard while the other is ignorant and idle all day long. Their lives in the future will be completely different." Xian was a little puzzled. "But Qing'er, you just said that flowers will wither. In that case, from the moment a flower is born, it will wither one day. Doesn't this mean that its fate has already been decided?" Qing'er thought for a moment and said, "We are talking about the process of fate. What you are talking about is the ending. It is a question beyond fate." Xian was a little curious. "A problem beyond fate? What is it?" Qing'er hesitated for a moment and said, "Let's talk about fate first." Xian was speechless. At the side, Dao Ling suddenly said, "I have a question." Qing'er looked at Dao Ling coldly. Dao Ling's expression changed drastically and his hair stood on end. What the hell? At this moment he seemed to see death. Dao Ling was shocked. He quickly said, I'm fine." Qing'er withdrew her gaze and looked at Xian. She said gently, "Is there anything else you don't understand?" Dao Ling's expression froze. "Isn't the difference in treatment too huge?" Xian thought for a moment and said, "I feel that fate is unfair. Take birth for example. Some people are born with things that others can't get in a lifetime." Qing'er nodded. "What you are talking about isn't just about fate. It is also about karmic luck. The karmic luck of the great path." Xian frowned. "The karmic luck of the great path?" Qing'er nodded slightly. "To put it simply, nothing is absolutely fair. An ordinary person needs a little bit of karmic luck besides their own hard work to get a good result. But some people are born with a golden spoon in their mouths. This is their own karmic luck." Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Qing'er, I was born as your brother. Is this karmic luck of the great path?" Qing'er nodded. "Yes." Then she looked at Xian and smiled. "It is also my karmic luck." Xian thought for a moment and said, "In that case, this Dedeabi seems to be treating us well." Somewhere in a room, Dedeabi suddenly roared. "Did you just realize that now?" Qing'er continued, "Karmic luck is illusory. It does exist but you can't see it. The reason I didn't kill it is because it is only operating your fate and giving you karmic luck. Of course, the most important thing is that it doesn't want to kill you. It just wants to make things harder for you, more bitter." Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Does it think I'm living too comfortably?" Qing'er nodded. Xian was a little displeased. "I used to live a miserable life." Qing'er thought for a moment and said, "I don't think it was that miserable." Xian was speechless. Qing'er said softly, "It is difficult to achieve the great path without going through great hardships. The path of cultivation is to cultivate the heart, and cultivating the heart is like forging a sword. How can a piece of iron become a sword if it is not tempered 1,000 times?" Xian looked at Qing'er and said in a low voice, "Qing'er, you must have suffered a lot to get to where you are today, right?" Looking at Xian, Qing'er said, "The hardest days for me are the days when you are not with me. Every day is hell for me." Xian was speechless. At the side, Dao Ling suddenly felt a little envious. "Damn it. Why didn't he have a sister?" Qing'er said, "Yang said you are too flashy but I don't think so. Brother, you don't have to listen to his nonsense. In terms of cultivation, he and the other swordsmen are both idiots. Big idiots." As she spoke, her expression gradually turned cold. She was obviously unhappy with some of the green-robed man's actions. Xian was speechless. Qing'er continued, "The path of cultivation is about the true self." "What is the true self?" "It is the true self. Your personality is just like that. Why would you change yourself when you have a choice?" There are many people in the world who live according to the requirements of others. Just like in this Milky Way, some people are told by their parents from the moment they are born what kind of person they want to be, what they have to do and so on. She shook her head slightly. Many people live according to the will of others from a young age and lose their true self. This kind of life is like a puppet. They are busy all their lives and completely lose themselves. They lose their true self. Dao Ling suddenly said in a low voice, "Senior, I don't think that's right. I think it's not a bad thing for your parents to make you become. Take me for example. When I was born, my parents told me to work hard to become the next clan leader of the Dao clan and avenge the clan. Although it's a burden, it's also a responsibility." Qing'er looked at Dao Ling. "You are told to live like that because you have no choice. But my brother has a choice. Do you understand?" Hearing this, Dao Ling's expression froze. He felt as though there were thousands of horses galloping in his heart. He decided not to speak anymore. He was afraid that he would die of anger if he continued. Qing'er looked at Yi Xian. "You are not young. You don't have to live according to his wishes. He has suffered, so he wants you to suffer as well. His mentality is abnormal and unhealthy." Yi Xian was slightly embarrassed when he heard this. "Qing'er seems to have a strong opinion of my father." Qing'er continued, "He has experienced great suffering and finally attained the Tao. He thinks that you should do the same. But he doesn't realize that not everyone needs to use such a method to attain the Tao. Cultivating the Tao is about cultivating the heart. Suffering and hardship can temper the heart, but it isn't the only way. There are other ways to temper the heart as well." Yi Xian asked hurriedly, "What other ways?" Qing'er thought for a moment and said, "I haven't noticed anything for now." Yi Xian's face froze and then he shook his head and smiled. Qing'er is quite mischievous at times. Qing'er continued, "In short, just be yourself." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." As he spoke, he gazed at Qing'er and smiled. "Qing'er, you don't have to suppress the brush of the Grand Tao anymore. I want to see what I'll be like without you to suppress it." Qing'er gazed at Yi Xian. "Are you sure?" Yi Xian nodded and spoke seriously. "I'll live my life in my own way from now on. However, I want to experience great suffering and hardship as well. Of course, I want to see if I'll be able to live a good life without your help." Qing'er remained silent for a long time before she said, "All right." As soon as she finished speaking, she opened her palm, and the walking sword suddenly left. The brush in the room heaved a sigh of relief. Since the sword had appeared in the room, it had been living in fear every single day. It was deeply afraid that the slightest dissatisfaction would cause it to be stabbed. Qing'er gazed at Yi Xian and asked, "Big brother, are you sure?" Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Qing'er, you're asking me twice in a row. I'm suddenly panicking." Qing'er said, "You can still go back on your word now." Yi Xian smiled and said, "There's no need." Qing'er nodded. "All right. I believe you." As soon as she finished speaking, her body gradually became illusory. As if she'd thought of something, Qing'er suddenly opened her palm, and the green profound sword in Yi Xian's hand and Xiao Ta within his body suddenly appeared in her palm. Yi Xian's expression instantly changed slightly when he witnessed this scene. "Qing'er, are you going to take back my green profound sword and Xiao Ta?" Qing'er nodded. "Yes. Of course, I can refuse to take them if you don't want to." Yi Xian remained silent for a long time before he said, "Take them back." He agreed. Qing'er nodded slightly. "Big brother, take care." As soon as she finished speaking, her body gradually became illusory, and the seaside gradually became blurry. Yi Xian was slightly curious. "Qing'er, what are you going to do now?" Qing'er said, "I'm going to talk to the other one." Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "The one who's even stronger than the great Tao brush?" Qing'er nodded. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Can you beat him?" Qing'er smiled faintly. "Big brother, do you know how strong your little sister is now?" Yi Xian shook his head. Qing'er blinked. "Saying that I'm invincible is a bit too humble." Yi Xian. Chapter 2245. Invincible? You're being modest? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Qing'er didn't say anything else and vanished completely. On the field, Yi Xian was silent. Xiao Ta was gone. Even the green profound sword was gone. He really didn't have any external objects now. Gu Chuan suddenly said, "Young master, do you have any other instructions?" Yi Xian smiled. "Tell my mother that I miss her. Once I'm done here, I'll go find her." Gu Chuan smiled. "All right." As he spoke, he opened his palm and a storage ring floated in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian blinked. "This is." Gu Chuan smiled. 1,000,000 universe veins. Yi Xian and Dao Ling were stunned. Gu Chuan smiled. "Master said that she can't participate in the battle of the great Tao. However, it's normal for a mother to give her son some pocket money, right?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, "It's normal." Dao Ling also said, it's very normal. Gu Chuan smiled and said, young master, take care. As he finished speaking, he turned and vanished into the horizon. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and a storage ring flew in front of Dao Ling. There were 300,000 universe veins in the storage ring. Dao Ling was stunned. Brother Yi, what are you doing? Yi Xian patted Dao Ling's shoulder. Cultivating together. Dao Ling was silent for a moment before saying, I'm also a competitor for the great Dao. We might be enemies in the future. Yi Xian smiled. Before that, let's defeat the other competitors first. Is that all right? Dao Ling laughed. All right. Yi Xian suddenly paced back and forth as if he was in deep thought. Dao Ling frowned. Brother Yi, what's wrong? Yi Xian's expression was rather solemn. Now we have two problems. Firstly, I don't have Xiaota anymore. In other words, we can no longer cheat in our cultivation. Second, my intuition tells me that besides the two of us and Shitian, there's surely someone else competing for the karmic luck of the Grand Dao. Right now we don't know anything about them, but they might know us. Without the green mystic sword and Xiaota, he had to think more. Furthermore, I just told Qing not to let Qing suppress the great Dao brush. In other words, my tribulation is about to begin. But if there was trouble, he couldn't go to Qing, could he? Otherwise it would be too embarrassing. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, no matter what, our top priority now is to increase our strength as soon as possible. And the fastest way to increase your strength is through battle. Dao Ling suddenly said, to the Shi clan. Yi Xian said, let's go. With that, the two of them disappeared on the spot. Since they couldn't cheat in their cultivation, they could only cultivate normally. Before long, the two of them arrived at the Shi clan. As soon as they arrived, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and roared, swords come. With that, countless swords pierced through time and space and arrived above the Shi clan. In an instant, the sky above the Shi clan was filled with millions of swords. At the side, Dao Ling suddenly roared, Dharma, body of all creations. With that, a Dharma idol tens of thousands of feet tall appeared in the sky behind him. A terrifying pressure swept down from the sky as if it wanted to crush heaven and earth. Yi Xian suddenly said, slash. With that, millions of swords slashed down from the sky. On the other side, Dao Ling suddenly roared, kill. With that, he slapped down with his palm. The Dharma idol suddenly slapped down with its palm, and a powerful force swept down from the sky. In an instant, the sky above the Shi clan boiled and then began to burn. As for Yi Xian and Dao Ling, they turned and ran. Below, Shi Qian and the others had ugly expressions. Shi Qian said fiercely, attack. With that, the experts of the Shi clan soared into the sky. At the end of the distant sky, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. Seeing Yi Xian stop, Dao Ling hurriedly stopped as well. He looked at Yi Xian a little confused. Brother Yi, what's wrong? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Why are we running? Aren't we going to find them to fight and improve ourselves? Hearing that, Dao Ling was stunned. That's right. Why are we running? Yi Xian said in a low voice, go back. With that, he and Dao Ling turned back and returned to the Shi clan. At this moment, the Shi clan was in a mess. Although there were many time realm experts in the Shi clan, they could not completely resist the powerful force released by Yi Xian and Dao Ling. The expressions of Shi Qian and the others were ugly. This Yi Xian and Dao Ling would occasionally release a few moves and then run. They were really like demons. At this moment, Yi Xian and Dao Ling suddenly turned back. Seeing Yi Xian and Dao Ling, Shi Qian frowned slightly. Just as Yi Xian and Dao Ling were about to make a move, a man slowly walked over from the distant sky. It was Shi Tian. Seeing Shi Tian, the experts of the Shi clan instantly became excited. Now Shi Tian was all the hope of their Shi clan. Seeing Shi Tian, Yi Xian and Dao Ling frowned. Shi Tian walked in front of Yi Xian and Dao Ling. He looked at Yi Xian and Dao Ling and said, the two of you, Shi Yuan is already dead. Can the enmity between my Shi clan and the two of you end here? Yi Xian shook his head. No. Dao Ling nodded. No. In the past, they had been hunted down by the Shi clan. How could this enmity end just like that? Shi Tian nodded slightly. Since that's the case, we can only fight. As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian and Dao Ling. Which one of you wants to fight me? Dao Ling said with a smile, I'll do it. The battle from before hasn't ended yet. Let's continue. Shi Tian nodded. That's exactly what I intend to do. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly entered an unknown region of space and time. Obviously, he didn't want to fight in the Shi clan. Dao Ling vanished on the spot as well. Only Yi Xian and the experts of the Shi clan remained in the battlefield. Shi Qian looked at Yi Xian with eyes filled with vigilance. After coming into contact with Yi Xian, he'd finally realized something. This fellow before him was full of evil tricks, so he had to be careful. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Shi Qian. Shaoan. As soon as he finished speaking, his brows suddenly knit together. Wait. Shaoan is in Xiao Ta's body. He was taken away by Qing. Yi Xian was slightly dazed. He'd actually forgotten about this. But very quickly Yi Xian smiled. Shaoan following Qing was definitely not a bad thing. Not only was it not a bad thing, it was definitely a good thing. After all, it was Qing. If Qing casually gave him some pointers, Shaoan's improvement, as if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian's expression turned somewhat ugly. Xiao Ta had also gone to the Milky Way to follow Qing. If Qing were to give this fellow some pointers, wouldn't this fellow become extremely arrogant? Yi Xian collected his thoughts and looked at Shi Qian and the other Time Realm experts of the Shi clan. The reason he'd come to the Shi clan to kill people, other than the Shi clan's pursuit of him, was because of Shaoan. Back then Shaoan had almost been beaten to death by the Shi clan. How could he not avenge this enmity? The Shi clan had to be exterminated. It didn't matter who came. Shi Qian suddenly said in a deep voice, "Young Master Yi Shiyuan's death is not enough?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "How is it enough?" Shi Qian said fiercely, "Do you really want to fight to the death?" A disdainful smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. "Isn't this already the case?" As his voice fell, he slowly closed his eyes. In the next moment, a sword light suddenly slashed towards Shi Qian. Slash the future. Shi Qian's pupils shrank. He hurriedly said, "Everyone join forces." Join forces. Facing Yi Xian's strange slash the future, he couldn't resist it alone. He needed several people to join forces to resist it. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly activated his bloodline power. Bang. In an instant, Yi Xian's entire body was covered in blood. A sea of blood filled the sky. Yi Xian suddenly grinned. "Great Dao Brush, without Qing to suppress me, I beg for your arrangements. Please arrange a more miserable arrangement for me. I Yi Xian have nothing to fear." As his voice fell, he suddenly rushed out. In the distance, the expressions of Shi Qian and the others were incomparably solemn. At this moment Yi Xian's aura was skyrocketing. Shi Qian said fiercely, "Kill him. Attack together." As his voice fell, the 6 people directly rushed towards Yi Xian. 6 flowing Time Realm powerhouses. This time Yi Xian didn't retreat. He wanted to challenge his own limits. Rumble. With a loud explosion, a bloody light suddenly exploded. In the next moment Yi Xian retreated madly, retreating tens of thousands of feet. After activating his bloodline power, his strength had skyrocketed. However, he still couldn't resist 6 flowing Time Realm powerhouses. After Yi Xian stopped, he slowly closed his eyes and opened his palms. Swords come. Bang. Suddenly the space-time behind him trembled violently. In the next moment, countless swords pierced through the heavens. In the blink of an eye, millions of swords had appeared behind Yi Xian. And these swords were actually blood-red. A sinister smile suddenly appeared on Yi Xian's face. He opened his palms. His palms split open and a stream of blood suddenly gushed out. In the next moment, that stream of blood directly condensed into a blood sword. Using his bloodline as a sword. In the distance, the expressions of Shi Qian and the others were incomparably solemn. Was this guy a blood elementalist or a swordsman? Why was he always using such fancy tricks? At this moment Yi Xian suddenly leaped up. Slash. As his voice fell, millions of swords slashed down from the sky behind him. In an instant, swords rained down from the sky above the Shi clan. The terrifying swords tore through everything. A sinister look flashed across Shi Qian's eyes. Kill? As his voice fell, 6 flowing Time Realm powerhouses suddenly rushed into the sky. Terrifying energy directly blasted towards Yi Xian's sword chi. At this moment Yi Xian suddenly disappeared from the spot. Heaven and earth split apart. A ray of sword light slashed straight down. Rumble. Suddenly the space-time above the Shi clan directly exploded. Immediately after, countless sword chi shattered. Shi Qian and the others were directly knocked back by the countless sword chi. As for Yi Xian himself, he was also knocked back several tens of thousands of zhang. As soon as he stopped, a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. In the distance, Shi Qian and the others all had sword wounds on their bodies. However, these injuries were not fatal to the 6 of them. Shi Qian looked at Yi Xian with an incomparably solemn expression. Young Master Yi Shiyuan is already dead. My Shi clan has paid the due price. Can the grudge between us end here? He was really afraid now. Although the 6 of them had not lost, The bloodline that Yi Xian had displayed was too terrifying. This kind of person, if it wasn't his father who was awesome, then it was his ancestors who were awesome. Also, that sword from before. This person definitely had a backer, and there might be more than one backer. At this moment, even if Shi Qian wanted to kill, he would not dare to kill Yi Xian. If he did, the Shi clan would definitely face a great calamity. In the distance, Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said calmly, "End? Sure. Kneel down for me this matter." Plop. Shi Qian suddenly knelt down. He looked at Yi Xian and said, "Young Master Yi, I kneel." As he spoke, he suddenly kowtowed and said, "Young Master Yi, we won't fight anymore. As long as young Master Yi is willing to let my Shi clan go, we can do anything." Yi Xian's expression stiffened. *CKME. P.S. I discovered that during the weekend there were very few comments from the readers. I observed for a very long time. Do you guys not read books during the weekend? Is it the kind that sleeps until noon? Chapter 2246. Yi Xian was flabbergasted. The experts of the Shi clan were flabbergasted as well. Especially the Time Realm experts in the lead. They were completely flabbergasted. They knelt just like that? At the beginning they were extremely furious. But it didn't take long for their anger to vanish, and it was replaced by deep helplessness. Helplessness? Actually, how could they not be aware that this young Master Yi wasn't someone the Shi clan could afford to offend? Even if Yi Xian was defeated and placed his head in front of them, they wouldn't dare to chop it off. Not to mention Pavilion Master Qin, just the person who created the sword behind Yi Xian and the source of Yi Xian's bloodline were absolutely not people the Shi clan could resist. The battle between Yi Xian and the Shi clan had only just begun, and the Shi clan's defeat had already been decided. This was a super monstrous genius with a backer. If they couldn't win, they would be beaten to death by him. If they could win, they would be beaten to death by the people behind him. No matter how they fought, the outcome would be death. When they thought up to here, the eyes of the Time Realm experts were filled with helplessness. The 6 of them weren't afraid of death. They wanted to live longer after living for so long, but it didn't mean that they were afraid of death. But they were afraid that the Shi clan would be annihilated. Backbone? There was no one who didn't want backbone. But what was a person's backbone compared to the Shi clan's fate? Shi Qian gazed at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, my Shi clan was wrong." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "You don't have to be like that. I've decided to rely on myself to obtain karmic luck. I won't rely on my father or my younger sister really." Shi Qian nodded. I understand everything." Yi Xian was speechless. "I've really decided to fight for karmic luck myself." "Fight me. If I can't win, then I absolutely won't call for help." "Really?" Shi Qian nodded. "I understand. We all understand. But we won't fight anymore. Young Master Yi, please be merciful and let my Shi clan off." Yi Xian was speechless. Right at this moment, Shi Tian suddenly appeared here, and he walked slowly over to Shi Qian and helped him up. Shi Qian shook his head. "The patriarch is wrong. We were all wrong." Shi Tian spoke softly, "My Shi clan has already paid the price." After he finished speaking, he turned to look at Yi Xian and Dao Ling who stood beside Yi Xian. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Shi Tian, when Dao Ling and you were fighting, Shi Yuan suddenly interfered. Do you think this matter is fair?" Shi Tian shook his head. "It's not fair." Yi Xian nodded. "The 2 of us have come here to challenge you. We have no intention of becoming enemies with the Shi tribe, but the Shi tribe is afraid of us. So they have mobilized their entire tribe to hunt us down. Do you think this is appropriate?" Shi Tian looked at Yi Xian. "It shouldn't be." Yi Xian smiled and said, "Then the 2 of us wanting to annihilate your Shi clan, is it reasonable?" Shi Tian nodded. "If it were me, I would also do the same." Yi Xian said, "Then kill yourselves." Dao Ling was speechless. Shi Tian and the others suddenly felt slightly dazed. "What the hell?" Yi Xian spoke indifferently, "Anyone with the slightest sense of shame would kill themselves." As he spoke, he looked at Dao Ling, "Don't you think so?" Dao Ling hesitated for a moment before he said, "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a slight pain in his heart. "Conscience." Yi Xian suddenly spoke via voice transmission. "Brother Dao Ling, what was the result of your battle with Shi Tian?" Dao Ling remained silent for a moment before he said, "He was very strong. I couldn't do anything to him and he couldn't do anything to me. However, I feel that he still hadn't used his full strength." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand." In the distance, Shi Tian suddenly said, Brother Yi, Brother Dao Ling, I'm very sorry about this. My Shi clan went too far, and I'm willing to apologize on behalf of my Shi clan. As he spoke, he paused for a moment before he continued, as an apology, I'll share the ruins of a time immortal with both of you. Yi Xian frowned slightly. The ruins of a time immortal? Shi Tian nodded and was about to speak. However, the three of them suddenly raised their heads. In the next moment, a terrifying bolt of divine lightning swept down from the sky, and its target was actually Yi Xian's group of three. Their expressions changed violently when this bolt of divine lightning appeared. It was too terrifying. Furthermore, the target of this divine lightning was the three of them. Someone wants to kill us. Who is it? They didn't have the time to think and immediately shot into the sky. In the next moment, rumble. The bolt of divine lightning suddenly exploded apart. However, Yi Xian's group of three were blasted over 30 kilometers back, and their bodies were instantly blasted apart as soon as they stopped moving. All three of them were stunned when they witnessed this scene. What's going on? Yi Xian raised his head and looked towards the end of the starry sky. He saw a shadow there, and the shadow held a bolt of lightning in its hand. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "Do all of you know him?" Shi Tian shook his head. Dao Ling shook his head as well. In the starry sky, the shadow looked down at Yi Xian's group of three with an indifferent expression, and then the bolt of divine lightning in its palm suddenly flew out. In an instant, the entire river of stars had been set ablaze. The expressions of Yi Xian's group of three instantly changed violently when they witnessed this scene, and then Yi Xian suddenly said, "Run!" As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Dao Ling and Shi Tian were slightly stunned. In the next moment they recovered from their shock and then they turned around and ran. However, the bolt of lightning was like a maggot that followed them relentlessly. Everywhere it passed, everything was destroyed, and that included the energy of time. In the starry sky, Yi Xian's group of three raised their speeds to their limits. However, the bolt of lightning was getting closer and closer to them. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "We'll be caught if we continue running like this." Dao Ling gazed at Yi Xian, "Do you have a good plan?" Yi Xian fell silent. Shi Tian hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Just now." Yi Xian gazed at Shi Tian, "You go first." Shi Tian hurriedly shook his head, "One? We have to go together." Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "That fellow's strength far surpasses the three of us. We underestimated him earlier and our bodies were destroyed. If we go together now, we'll only be giving our lives away. The important matter at hand is to find a safe place." Shi Tian hurriedly said, "Where's the safe place?" Yi Xian said, "We're here." As soon as he finished speaking, they'd arrived at the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. As soon as they arrived at the pavilion, the masked old man appeared before Yi Xian's group of three, and his expression instantly changed violently when he saw the bolt of lightning behind Yi Xian's group of three. "Fuck. Young Master Yi, what the hell are you doing?" Yi Xian was slightly stunned. "Senior, what are you talking about? I don't understand. The three of us are here to buy something." The masked old man angrily pointed at the bolt of lightning behind Yi Xian, "That bolt of divine lightning." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "It has nothing to do with us. It might be here to cause trouble for you." The masked old man. Yi Xian's group of three slipped into the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. The masked old man angrily roared, "Sacrificial array." As soon as he finished speaking, a huge light screen enveloped the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. The bolt of divine lightning struck. Rumble. The huge light screen shook violently and then it shattered. The entire Immortal Treasure Pavilion split open, but it did not completely shatter. Within the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, Yi Xian's group of three were horrified. Dao Ling said in a low voice, "So terrifying." Shi Tian nodded and his heart was still palpitating, "So ferocious." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian worriedly, "Brother Yi, what if this Immortal Treasure Pavilion can't stop it?" Yi Xian picked up the teacup on the table and took a sip, then said, "Let's go to the next one." Shi Tian. Dao Ling. Yi Xian turned to look at them, "Do the two of you have any other ideas?" Both of them shook their heads repeatedly and said in unison, "We'll listen to Brother Yi." Outside the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, the masked old man gazed at the figure in the depths of the starry sky with an extremely solemn expression. "Sir, this is the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. The Immortal Treasure Pavilion." The figure suddenly clenched his right hand tightly when he heard this. Qingguan. He'd fought this woman in the past, and even his eternal tribulation body had been blasted into pieces. The figure had intended to attack, but he seemed to be slightly fearful. He was still fearful of Qingguan. What a showy woman. A short moment later, the figure spoke in a low voice, "I'm looking for the three of them. Ask them to come out." In the end, he didn't dare to attack. The masked old man hesitated for a moment and said, "Wait a moment." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and entered the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. He arrived before Yi Xian's group of three and smiled bitterly. "Young Master Yi?" Yi Xian suddenly asked. "Senior, you said that you and Miss Qingguan wouldn't interfere in the competition for karmic luck, right?" The masked old man hurriedly nodded. "Yes. We won't interfere in the competition for karmic luck. So, young Master Yi, what do you think?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. "Senior, what does that person have to do with the competition for karmic luck?" The masked old man's face froze. Yi Xian withdrew the Black Heaven token and said, "Senior, according to my knowledge, one can obtain the protection of the Immortal Treasure Pavilion with this token, right?" The masked old man nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian passed the Black Heaven token to the old man. "Senior?" The masked old man smiled bitterly. "Young Master Yi, I can't beat that person. I can't beat him at all. In the Immortal Treasure Pavilion, only Pavilion Master Qin can beat him." Yi Xian said, 1 hour. Help me by 1 hour. After 1 hour, the three of us will leave." The masked old man was in a difficult position. Yi Xian sighed softly and turned to look at Dao Ling and Shirtian. "Let's go." As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and left. Dao Ling and Shirtian hesitated for a moment and left as well. The three of them walked very slowly. Beside Yi Xian, Dao Ling suddenly sent a voice transmission with Xian Qi. "Brother Yi, are we really leaving?" Yi Xian said, "He will ask us to stay." Dao Ling nodded, "All right." When they were about to reach the door, the masked old man still did not speak. Dao Ling hesitated for a moment and said, "Brother Yi, he doesn't seem to want us to stay. What should we do?" Yi Xian was speechless. In next to no time, the three of them had stepped out of the door. As soon as they did, they saw the figure in the distant horizon, and the figure held a bolt of lightning in each hand. Their expressions changed slightly when they witnessed this scene. Dao Ling said in a low voice, "Brother Yi." Yi Xian said, "Come, let's go back." Dao Ling hesitated for a moment and said, "Isn't that a little too embarrassing?" Yi Xian said indifferently, "Embarrassing or losing your life? Choose." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and walked back. Dao Ling hesitated for a moment, and then he turned around and walked back as well. "It's better to lose face." Shirtian watched as the two of them walked back. He was slightly hesitant because he really couldn't bring himself to do that. Meanwhile, the figure's gaze locked onto Shirtian, and a shapeless pressure enveloped Shirtian. When he sensed how terrifying the pressure was, Shirtian immediately turned around and walked back. "Damn it. I can't lose face." Chapter 2247. In the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, the masked old man looked at the three shameless fellows and felt helpless. The three of them had made it clear that they weren't going to leave. Force them out? The problem was that even though they couldn't defeat the fellow outside, it didn't mean that they couldn't defeat him. Moreover, once they fell out with him, they might even ransack the Celestial Treasure Pavilion with their shamelessness. This was difficult. The masked old man sighed softly. "I can buy some time for you, but I don't know how long." Yi Xian nodded hurriedly. "All right. We'll leave once our bodies recover." The masked old man hesitated for a moment and said, "Are you sure?" Yi Xian said seriously, "I guarantee it with my character." The masked old man's expression froze. "Character? Do you even have character?" The masked old man felt bitter in his heart, but he didn't say anything else. He stood up and left. In the room, Yi Xian and the other two started to reconstruct their bodies immediately. Their top priority now was to recover their bodies. Only when their bodies recovered would they have a chance to fight the Phantom. They'd really underestimated the enemy before this. The masked old man arrived in front of the Phantom in the starry sky. He hesitated for a moment and said, "They won't come out." The Phantom didn't speak, but a terrifying pressure appeared in the surroundings. The masked old man said hurriedly, "Sir, if you want to attack the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, then I can only ask the Pavilion Master to come." The Phantom said calmly, "Are you threatening me?" The masked old man shook his head. "Sir, I've communicated with them just now. Once their bodies recover, they'll come out and fight you." The Phantom fell silent. The masked old man didn't speak either. To be honest, he wasn't a coward. Even though he couldn't defeat the person in front of him, he had Qingguan behind him. It felt good to have someone behind him, and he felt confident in everything he did. A moment later the phantom said, "I'll wait for them." The masked old man nodded and turned to leave. After the masked old man left, the phantom slowly clenched his right hand. No one knew what he was thinking. In the Celestial Treasure Pavilion, Yi Xian and the other two had recovered their bodies. Yi Xian looked at the masked elder in front of him and asked in a deep voice, "Senior, who is that person?" The masked old man said, "The Tribulation Lord was born in response to tribulation. His true form is a bolt of tribulation lightning. He is extremely terrifying." Yi Xian frowned. "Why did he want to kill the three of us?" The masked old man said in a low voice, "He wants to devour your karmic luck of the Grand Tao." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Can the providence of the Great Tao be devoured?" The masked elder nodded. The masked old man said in a deep voice, "This person participated in the destruction of the evil spirit race back then. His strength is terrifying. He's definitely not someone the three of you can fight against right now." Yi Xian quickly said, "Then can we stay here a little longer?" The masked old man hesitated for a moment before he said, "Actually, the three of you should be able to fight him if you join forces." Yi Xian roared with laughter and then he said, "Senior, thank you. The three of us will remember this favor. Goodbye." With that he turned around and left. Dao Ling and Shirtian hurriedly turned around and left as well. The masked old man remained silent within the room. Meanwhile, a young man suddenly walked over to the masked old man's side. "Grandfather, all three of them are extraordinary geniuses. Why don't you take this opportunity to befriend them?" The masked old man shook his head and smiled bitterly. "How can I befriend them? Let them stay here? Perhaps they will be fine, but the few hundred of us here might be annihilated." The young man hurriedly said, "Can't we contact the pavilion master?" The masked old man shook his head and smiled, but he didn't say anything. Outside, Yi Xian's group of three arrived in midair, and their expressions were extremely solemn as they gazed at the Tribulation Lord in the distance. "He's truly formidable." After the three of them attained the time realm, they were practically invincible existences amongst their peers. However, they still felt a terrifying pressure when facing this Tribulation Lord. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Do you trust me?" The two of them instantly hesitated upon hearing this. Yi Xian's face darkened. "What's with all of your expressions?" Dao Ling laughed bitterly. "Brother Yi, you can't joke at a time like this. This fellow is extremely terrifying. If you try anything funny then I think we'll die here." Shirtian hurriedly said as well, "Don't act rashly." Yi Xian smiled, "Don't worry, I won't act rashly. Both of you keep him busy while I play with the sword." Dao Ling nodded. "All right." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure suddenly leaped up. In the next moment, an enormous Dharma idol appeared in the sky behind him. Dao Ling looked down at the image below him, and a wisp of a ferocious expression flashed through his eyes before he smashed his fist forward. Rumble. A 30 kilometers long fist smashed down towards the Tribulation Lord, and the formidable force it carried instantly caused the entire starry sky to seethe. Meanwhile, Shirtian suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, numerous terrifying afterimages smashed down towards the Tribulation Overlord. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes, and he seemed as if he'd entered into a meditative state. The Tribulation Lord had a calm expression on his face. When the fist and the afterimages arrived in front of him, he suddenly opened his palm, and then the lightning within his palm transformed into an expanse of lightning that surged forward. Rumble. The fist suddenly shattered into pieces. Moreover, Dao Ling's figure instantly retreated explosively for over 100 kilometers while his Dharma idol was instantly transformed into nothingness. Shirtian, who just arrived in front of the Tribulation Lord, was suddenly blasted over 100 kilometers away while countless afterimages were obliterated. However, the Tribulation Lord was retreating repeatedly as well. Even though it was slow, he was really retreating. Right at this moment, a ray of light suddenly appeared above the Tribulation Lord. The Tribulation Lord's eyes narrowed slightly while his expression remained calm. He lightly swept his right hand upwards, and then a bolt of lightning smashed against the ray of light. Bang! The ray of light shattered. But in the next moment, another ray of light appeared at the center of the Tribulation Lord's forehead. Moreover, a few hundred swords had appeared successively, and they were actually stabbing towards different spots and different periods of time. The Tribulation Lord frowned slightly when he witnessed this scene, and then he suddenly clenched his right fist and smashed it down in front of him. Rumble. In an instant, the space in front of him had sunk down and transformed into a huge and terrifying vortex. However, it was utterly useless, because he'd only shattered the swords of this period of time, and he wasn't able to harm the swords of the next period of time at all. The Tribulation Lord was slightly shocked, and he had no choice but to resist them repeatedly. Bang! Bang! Numerous rays of light were descending incessantly towards the Tribulation Lord, and he had no choice but to retreat by over 1 kilometer. However, Yi Xian's swords were appearing incessantly, and it seemed like they were endless. Suddenly, the Tribulation Lord raised his head and waved his right hand. A bolt of divine lightning suddenly descended from the sky and smashed down towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly, and then he suddenly flicked his left thumb upwards. A ray of light shot into the sky and slashed against the bolt of divine lightning. Bang! The ray of light shattered, and then the bolt of divine lightning descended in a straight line. Yi Xian's brows knit together even more tightly. He was clearly aware of the Tribulation Lord's intentions. So long as the Tribulation Lord was able to stop him, then he would have no choice but to stop his attack. Suddenly, a fist smashed against the bolt of divine lightning. Bang! The divine lightning was blasted apart. Dao Ling appeared above Yi Xian, and a ferocious expression appeared on his face as he gazed at the Tribulation Lord. "Eat this." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly clenched his right hand. In an instant, a strand of terrifying force converged in his fist, and then he charged forward and smashed his fist down upon the Tribulation Lord when he arrived in front of him. Rumble. In an instant, the space around the Tribulation Lord was obliterated. His strength was truly too terrifying. A ferocious expression flashed through the Tribulation Lord's eyes as he stood amidst the countless rays of light. He suddenly clenched his right fist tightly and smashed it against Dao Ling's fist. Rumble. Dao Ling was blasted over 30 kilometers away, and his figure had just stopped when his body cracked apart while blood sprayed incessantly from his mouth. At this moment he felt like his internal organs were on the verge of exploding. Meanwhile, the Tribulation Lord had just blasted Dao Ling flying, and then he hurriedly moved back to defend himself against Yi Xian's attack. But right at this moment, a shadow suddenly charged behind the Tribulation Lord, and then it smashed its fist against the back of the Tribulation Lord's head. Rumble. The Tribulation Lord was blasted over 1 kilometer away, but he hadn't even stopped moving when a few hundred swords slashed against him. The sound of something tearing apart resounded incessantly. The Tribulation Lord retreated madly amidst the rays of light, and countless swords swarmed towards him as he retreated. They connected perfectly in succession, and they didn't give him any chance to catch his breath. Meanwhile, Dao Ling and Shirtian had charged at the Tribulation Lord. Both of them were very clearly aware of the principle of strike while the enemy is down. So, they had to kill the Tribulation Lord right now. Yi Xian's face was drenched with sweat. It was the first time he'd executed future severing at such a high level, and it was too exhausting. Because he had to calculate every single step the Tribulation Lord took, what sort of reaction the Tribulation Lord might make, and so on and so forth. He had to calculate everything because only then would he be able to slash the Tribulation Lord to the point he couldn't pay attention to anything else. Sword strike after sword strike. The Tribulation Lord was pushed back over and over again by the frenzied attacks of Yi Xian's group of 3. In a short period of time, he'd retreated over 100 kilometers. At this moment, his body was covered in countless injuries, and his body was practically on the verge of being torn into pieces by Yi Xian's swords. Suddenly, the Tribulation Lord roared furiously, "Fuck off!" As soon as he finished speaking, he abandoned his body, and his soul suddenly left his body and rose into the air. In an instant, countless swords from Yi Xian slashed through the air. Yi Xian was shocked and he hurriedly raised his head. He was just about to attack when the Tribulation Lord suddenly slapped his palm down towards him. Bang! In an instant, a few 100,000 bolts of Tribulation lightning swept down from the sky. Rumble. At this moment, the entire starry sky was forcefully obliterated. As for Yi Xian's group of 3, they were blasted over 100 kilometers away. As soon as they stopped moving, their bodies shattered at the same time, and only their souls remained. Their countenances were extremely pale, and their eyes were filled with a solemn expression. The Tribulation Lord gazed at Yi Xian's group of 3 with a ferocious expression on his face. "Damnable ants! If Qin Guan hadn't destroyed my Tribulation body that day, how could ants like you possibly injure me?" As he spoke, he suddenly clenched his fists. In an instant, countless bolts of lightning appeared around him, and then numerous strands of terrifying pressure swept down from the sky. Dao Ling and Shirtian's expressions instantly changed drastically. because they would definitely be unable to hold on at this moment. Suddenly Yi Xian withdrew the spear he'd obtained from Qin Guan, and he aimed it at the Tribulation Lord with a calm expression. "Did Miss Qin use this when she shattered your body?" The Tribulation Lord's expression instantly changed drastically when he saw the spear in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, "Get over here!" His voice was slightly trembling. The Tribulation Lord was speechless. "You guys vote." Chapter 22:48. Needless to say, the Tribulation Lord was really quite panicked right now. After all, he'd experienced the might of this weapon in the past. That spear had instantly blasted his Tribulation physique into pieces. Even now, he still felt a lingering fear when he thought about it. Moreover, he wasn't in his Tribulation physique any longer. So, if he were to suffer another attack, then even if he survived, his soul would suffer a heavy injury. When he thought up to here, the Tribulation Lord glanced coldly at Yi Xian, and then he turned around and vanished into the starry sky. He fled. Dao Ling and Shi Tian instantly heaved sighs of relief when they witnessed this scene. Meanwhile, a wisp of disdain arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. He aimed his spear towards the distance and remained silent. Dao Ling and Shi Tian were first stunned, and then their expressions changed violently. The Tribulation Lord hasn't left? Yi Xian's expression was calm. "Tribulation Lord, what are you hiding for? Show yourself." There was no response. Dao Ling and Shi Tian had vigilant expressions on their faces. Their divine senses swept towards the distance, yet there was nothing. They were instantly puzzled. Yi Xian chuckled, "Do you think I didn't notice you? How laughable." There was still no response. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly, and the profound energy within him surged into the weapon in his hand. Meanwhile, the space in the distance trembled slightly, and then the Tribulation Lord who'd left earlier appeared here once more. Dao Ling and Shi Tian were astounded when they witnessed this scene. That fellow really hasn't left. The Tribulation Lord gazed at Yi Xian. "How did you notice me?" Yi Xian ridiculed. "Do you think your concealment technique is very formidable? How laughable." The Tribulation Lord took a deep and long glance at Yi Xian, and then he turned around and vanished. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. How did I notice this Tribulation Lord? I guessed it, of course. As far as he was concerned, it was absolutely impossible for the Tribulation Lord to give up on killing the three of them so easily. Moreover, the Tribulation Lord was most afraid of the spear in his hand. So, if he'd shown any unusual signs or relaxed just now, then the Tribulation Lord would have definitely attacked again. His guess was right. Dao Ling glanced at Yi Xian and was slightly curious. "Brother Yi, how did you notice him?" Shi Tian looked at Yi Xian as well, and his eyes were filled with curiosity. Just now, both of them had scanned the area with their divine senses several times, but they hadn't found the Tribulation Lord at all. Yi Xian glanced at the two of them, pointed to his head, and then turned to leave. Dao Ling frowned. What does he mean? Shi Tian hesitated for a moment and then he said, "I think he said we're brainless." Dao Ling. Somewhere in the starry sky, Yi Xian and the other two sat facing each other. Recover his physical body. 2 hours later, the bodies of the three of them had recovered and their expressions were grave. That Tribulation Lord was simply too powerful. Yi Xian suddenly said, "He will come again." Dao Ling and Shi Tian were silent. Yi Xian said, "There's a very important reason why we were able to shatter his body just now, and that's because he underestimated us. He looked down on us from the very beginning and then we caught him off guard." The two of them nodded. Yi Xian continued, "I think that he might not be alone. He might represent some power." Shi Tian and Dao Ling were stunned when they heard this, and then they gazed at Yi Xian. Dao Ling said in a low voice, "Brother Yi, you said that he represents some power. Why do you think so?" Yi Xian said, "That masked old man said something in the Celestial Treasure Pavilion just now. He said that they'd annihilated the evil spirit race and he was one of them. One of them means that there are others." Shi Tian and Dao Ling's faces instantly sank when they heard this. A single Tribulation Lord is already so terrifying, so what if this fellow has an enormous power behind him? And he's playing with hammers? Both of them seemed to have thought of something and they gazed at Yi Xian. Dao Ling said in a low voice, "Brother Yi, do you have any way to resist this Tribulation Lord and the power behind him?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "We're definitely unable to defeat him now, and we're definitely unable to flee as well. It's pointless no matter where we flee when facing an expert of such a level." Hearing this, the expressions of Dao Ling and the other man turned a little ugly. Yi Xian suddenly said, "The important matter at hand is to improve our strength, but we need time to do so. Moreover, that tribulation lord will absolutely not give us that time. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and the dark sky token appeared there. He activated it, and it didn't take long for the masked old man to appear in front of Yi Xian. The masked old man bowed slightly. Young Master Yi. Yi Xian gazed at the masked old man. Where is the most dangerous place in this universe? The masked old man thought for a moment and said, 3 places. The Zhou clan's forbidden grounds, the Permitha of time within the river of time, and the ancient tomb in space. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, how dangerous are they? The masked old man glanced at Yi Xian's group of 3, and then he said, extremely dangerous. Yi Xian's brows knit together slightly. Be more specific. The masked old man said, all of you will definitely die if you go there. Yi Xian asked another question. Which of these 3 places is the most dangerous? The masked old man spoke in a low voice, the ancient tomb in space. Yi Xian nodded. Give me a map. The masked old man hesitated for a moment and said, young Master Yi, we really can't go there. Yi Xian hurriedly said, then I'll head to the Immortal Treasure Pavilion. The masked old man immediately withdrew a map and passed it to Yi Xian. This is the location of the ancient tomb. Yi Xian was speechless. A short while passed before the masked old man left. Yi Xian gazed at the map and said, we have to head to the ancient tomb. Dao Ling hesitated for a moment and said, Brother Yi, can you tell me why? Yi Xian spoke softly, we're definitely unable to go against that tribulation lord with our current strength. So, we need to borrow its strength. Dao Ling was slightly puzzled. Will the ancient tomb help us? Yi Xian shook his head. It won't. Dao Ling was astounded. Yi Xian continued, it's exactly because it won't, that's why we have to go. We have to sell ourselves, understand? Shi Tian hesitated for a moment at the side, and then he said, Brother Yi, what do you mean by selling yourself? Yi Xian said, just act according to my mood later. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished into the starry sky. Dao Ling and Shi Tian exchanged glances, and then they vanished as well. On the other side, the masked old man from the Immortal Treasure Pavilion looked up into the sky with a dazed expression. What's young Master Yi going to do? Is he going to give his life away? The Zhou clan. Zhou Yu sat silently in a room with an extremely solemn expression. The Tribulation Lord. She didn't know the Tribulation Lord, but that wasn't the main point. The main point was that the Tribulation Lord had dared to kill 3 people who possessed karmic luck of the Grand Daos at the same time. Meanwhile, a white-haired old man appeared in the room. Zhou Yu was shocked when she saw the old man, and she hurriedly stood up and said, Grandfather. Zhou Ku, the previous patriarch of the Zhou clan. Zhou Ku smiled. Little girl, what do you think our Zhou clan should do now? Zhou Yu shook her head. I'll listen to grandfather. Zhou Ku gazed at Zhou Yu. I want to listen to you. Zhou Yu was shocked. Is he testing me? Zhou Yu fell silent for a moment before she said, my original intention was to befriend Yi Xian. But now, this matter is of great importance. The Zhou clan might be doomed eternally. So I want to wait and see. Zhou Ku fell silent. Zhou Yu hesitated for a moment and said, Grandfather? Zhou Ku grinned. Little girl, you're still too young. Even though you're cautious, you're not decisive enough. Zhou Yu hurriedly said, please provide me with your guidance, grandfather. Zhou Ku smiled. What do you think of Pavilion Master Qin? Zhou Yu spoke in a low voice. An extraordinary person. Zhou Ku grinned. What about her judgment? Zhou Yu's pupils constricted when she heard this. She understood now. Who does Qingguan favor? Yi Xian. Even an extraordinary person like Qingguan favors Yi Xian. What does this mean? In the starry sky, Yi Xian's group of 3 were traversing through space. The closer they got to the ancient tomb in the starry sky, the more uneasy Yi Xian's group of 3 felt. Danger. Meanwhile, Dao Ling spoke in a low voice. Brother Yi, the place we're heading to this time is extremely dangerous. Shi Tian hurriedly nodded. Very dangerous. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Is the Culpa Lord in danger? Both Dao Ling and Shi Tian fell silent. Yi Xian chuckled lightly. Don't be afraid. I'm here. As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished into the distance. Shi Tian and Dao Ling exchanged glances, and then they hurriedly followed Qin Shi. Around an hour later, Yi Xian's group of 3 arrived at a silent expanse of the starry sky. They saw over 10 ancient tombs in the depths of the starry sky, and they were silent and desolate as they stood towering in the starry sky. At this moment, All three of them had extremely solemn expressions on their faces. Danger. They'd sensed extreme danger when they arrived here, and it was even more dangerous than facing the Culpa Lord. Dao Ling spoke in a low voice. Brother Yi, what should we do? Yi Xian suddenly walked over to the largest tomb. Suddenly, a terrifying aura enveloped the three of them. The three of them were slightly unable to catch their breaths when they were enveloped by this terrifying aura. How terrifying! All three of them were shocked. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Senior, can we talk? Meanwhile, a blurry figure appeared in front of Yi Xian. The blurry figure was like a ghost and it was extremely strange. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Hello, Senior. We've come to seek help from you. Dao Ling was speechless. Shi Tian was speechless. The figure spoke in a hoarse voice. Why? Yi Xian spoke with a serious expression. Senior, what do you think of the three of us? The figure fell silent for a moment and then he said, Those who possess the karmic luck of the Grand Tao are naturally not bad. Yi Xian smiled. Geniuses that haven't matured are meaningless. The three of us are being pursued by the Culpa Lord right now, so we want Senior to help us and sow good karma. The figure said, Why? Yi Xian looked straight at the figure. Senior, if you help us today, then we'll definitely repay this favor in the future if we don't die. As he spoke seriously. We can't give Senior anything now, but we'll definitely be invincible in the future. No, we don't need the future, just 1 year. In 1 year we'll be invincible in the starry sky. Senior, help us now and we'll each owe you a favor. This favor isn't worth much now, but what about in the future? At this point he paused for a moment and then he continued. Senior, the three of us really aren't bad. In the entire universe, there's no more outstanding young man than the three of us. You can invest in us. At the side, Dao Ling and Shi Tian instantly felt slightly embarrassed. Although they felt that they were very outstanding, they couldn't brag about themselves like this even if they were beaten to death. Chapter 2249. The figure in front of Yi Xian was silent. After a long time the figure said, You're amazing. Yi Xian, the figure said again, Young man, do you know who the Tribulation Lord is? Yi Xian said seriously, I don't know, but I know that Senior is not afraid of him at all. The figure smiled, Why do you say so? Yi Xian smiled, If Senior is afraid of him, you wouldn't have listened to me so much. The figure nodded, I am not afraid of him, but I don't want to provoke him and the forces behind him. Yi Xian suddenly said, 1 year, Senior will protect us for 1 year. The figure was silent for a moment, then said, I can't protect you for a year, but I can find a place for you. You can go there because the Tribulation Lord doesn't dare to rashly go there, but it's extremely dangerous. Yi Xian asked, What place? The figure said, The Primordial God Land, an ancient civilization forbidden area. Even a powerhouse like the Time Immortal doesn't dare to rashly step into that place. Of course there are opportunities there. Yi Xian was silent. The figure continued, You choose. Yi Xian turned to look at Dao Ling and Shi Tian. Dao Ling said solemnly, We'll listen to you. Shi Tian nodded, We'll listen to Brother Yi. Yi Xian said, Let's go. The figure said, Think carefully. Yi Xian said with a smile, Yes. The figure nodded slightly, opened his palm, and a huge teleportation array appeared in front of Yi Xian's group. The figure said, Enter this array and you can reach the Primordial God Land. Dao Ling and Shi Tian were about to enter when Yi Xian suddenly said, What's your name, Senior? The figure smiled, Huang. Yi Xian nodded slightly and was about to speak, when a terrifying aura came from the distant horizon. At the same time lightning flashed all around. Tribulation Lord. Seeing this, Yi Xian's group's expression changed slightly. Huang said, Go in. I'll stop him. Yi Xian bowed slightly, Senior Huang, the three of us will remember this favor. Huang laughed and said, I hope you remember what you said today. Yi Xian nodded. Definitely. Then he led Dao Ling and Shi Tian into the teleportation formation. Yi Xian's group of 3 had just vanished when the Tribulation Lord appeared here. The Tribulation Master looked at Huang. Huang, are you going to interfere in this matter? Huang said plainly, They have already gone to the Great Void Immortal Lands. If you have the guts, go after them. Great Void Immortal Land. Hearing this, Huang's expression instantly became unsightly. However, Huang didn't pay any attention to him and disappeared from where he stood. The Culpa Lord remained silent for a moment before he vanished on the spot. After entering the teleportation array, Yi Xian's group of 3 suddenly felt the world spinning around them. It did not take long before the three of them appeared in a mountain range. Looking around, they saw an endless mountain range that they could not see the end of. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Let's find a place first." As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced at the surroundings and vanished on the spot. In an instant he'd arrived at the peak of a mountain range. Dao Ling and Shirtian followed closely behind him. They were able to look down at the boundless mountain range from this position. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Have all of you noticed something?" Dao Ling was slightly puzzled. "What is it?" Yi Xian spoke softly, "It's too quiet." Only now did Dao Ling and Shirtian notice that it was just as Yi Xian had said. It had been unusually quiet since they'd arrived here. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, "There's a formidable existence here. Moreover, that existence has definitely noticed us." Dao Ling spoke in a low voice, "What should we do?" Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and said, "Senior, since you've noticed us, then why don't you show yourself?" His voice had just resounded when an old man suddenly appeared not too far away from Yi Xian's group of three. The old man wore an ancient black robe, had white hair, and an extremely sharp gaze that was like that of an eagle's. The old man stared at Yi Xian's group of three and said, "You possess the karmic luck of the Grand Tao." Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." The old man's face was expressionless. "Why have we come here?" Yi Xian smiled, "The seniors of our clan asked us to come here to temper ourselves." "The seniors of our clan?" The old man frowned slightly. "You came here to temper yourselves?" Yi Xian nodded. "They said that this place is the most dangerous, so they asked us to play here for a while before returning." The old man gazed at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian suddenly grinned, and then he opened his palm, causing a spatial ring to float over to the old man. There were 100,000 universe veins within the spatial ring. The old man was stunned by this scene. What are you doing?" Yi Xian smiled, "Senior, we've just arrived here, so we really don't know much about this place. We want to understand this place." The old man's expression gradually softened as he put the spatial ring away and said, "It's a small matter. This place is the Divine Void Grounds, and it's divided into 4 regions: North, South, East, and West. Every single region has a terrifying existence, the region lord. They're existences that you absolutely can't offend. Otherwise, you might die even if you possess the karmic luck of the Grand Tao." Yi Xian nodded slightly, "I understand." The old man continued, "Besides the region lords of these 4 regions, there are also some primeval variant beasts. All of them were left behind from the primeval times, and they're extremely terrifying as well. Don't offend them rashly." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior, which places are safer?" The old man glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Nowhere is safe." Yi Xian was speechless. The old man continued, "Moreover, forgive me for being blunt, but it's really dangerous for you to come here. Because many experts covet the karmic luck of the Grand Tao that you possess." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Senior, there's something I don't understand. We possess the karmic luck of the Grand Tao, which means that Dedeabi is on our side. Why would anyone dare to touch us?" The old man said indifferently, "That's true, but possessing the karmic luck of the Grand Tao doesn't mean that you're invincible. You should know that if you act improperly and do something you shouldn't, your karmic luck of the Grand Tao will dissipate, and once it does, you'll die as well." Yi Xian fell silent. "I should have asked Qing to get Dedeabi to give me more karmic luck of the Grand Tao." "Dedeabi?" The old man continued, "However, ordinary experts wouldn't dare to look for you. You possess the karmic luck of the Grand Tao, so you're obviously not ordinary. Ordinary experts wouldn't dare to offend you, but if they do, then they're definitely top experts." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Understood." The old man glanced at Yi Xian. "Take care." After saying that, he vanished on the spot. In the field, Dao Ling, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly said, "Brother Yi, what should we do now?" Yi Xian thought about it and said, "Some of the top experts here must already know of our arrival. Therefore, it's impossible to keep a low profile. Since we can't keep a low profile, we'll keep a high profile. We'll keep a high profile." Dao Ling was a little curious. "How do we keep a high profile?" Yi Xian looked around. Then he said with a smile, "Follow me." After saying that, he suddenly rode his sword and soared into the sky. Dao Ling and Shirtian looked at each other and hesitated for a moment before following him. Yi Xian began to fly on the sword at an extremely fast speed. Not only did he fly on the sword, but he also made the sword emit sword chimes. He rode the sword from south to north, then from north to west, then from west to east. In an instant, the entire Great Void sacred ground became lively. Many powerhouses raised their heads to look at Yi Xian and the other two who were riding on their swords in the sky, their faces filled with confusion. Where did this show-off come from? Soon Yi Xian rode his sword around the entire great void sacred ground. No one came out to stop the three of them. In the sky Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Is the southern region domain lord around? There was no response. Yi Xian suddenly used sword draw to determine life and death in the sky. After that, he used one sword to determine life and death. Finally he activated his bloodline power. The powerful bloodline power engulfed the entire sky. The entire sky turned blood red and the entire great void sacred ground felt a powerful bloodline power. That attitude was just short of saying, I have someone backing me. At the side, Dao Ling and Shirtian were stunned. What was Brother Yi doing? At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian's group. As soon as the middle-aged man appeared, Yi Xian's group of three felt an invisible pressure. It was even more terrifying than the Culpa Lords. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian without saying a word. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, are you the Southern Region Domain Lord? The middle-aged man nodded. Yi Xian smiled. I've heard of your name for a long time. The Southern Region Domain Lord frowned. You've heard of me? Yi Xian nodded. I've heard of you from my elders. The Southern Region Domain Lord looked at Yi Xian. Your bloodline is not simple. What's your father's name? Yi Xian replied, Yang Yi. The Southern Region Domain Lord shook his head. I've never heard of him. Yi Xian said with a smile, It's normal that you haven't heard of him. My dad keeps a low profile. As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and then the green-clothed man's image appeared here. The Southern Region Domain Lord was shocked when he saw the green-clothed man. Just an image actually makes me feel slightly uneasy? Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, to tell you the truth, I've come here to ask for your help. I want to form good karma with you. The Southern Region Domain Lord glanced at Yi Xian. What kind of good karma? Yi Xian spoke seriously. The three of us are being pursued by the Culpa Lord and he should be here soon. We want to ask Senior to help us stop him. The Southern Region Domain Lord immediately shook his head. It has nothing to do with me. Yi Xian suddenly pointed at himself, Dao Ling and Shirtian. Senior, what do you think of the three of us? The Southern Region Domain Lord hesitated for a moment before he said, Very outstanding. Even during the primeval times, all of you were top-rate monstrous geniuses. Yi Xian spoke seriously, Senior, to be honest, no one in this world is more monstrous than the three of us. We'll definitely be invincible in the future. Right now we just need a little bit of time. If Senior can buy us some time and allow us to grow, then we'll definitely be invincible in the future. 10 years? 3 years? No. We just need a year. So long as Senior can buy us some time, then we'll be invincible after a year. Invincible throughout the world. As he spoke he grinned, Senior, this deal is really worth it. The Southern Region Domain Lord was speechless. Chapter 2250. The Southern Territory Lord was filled with disbelief. There's actually such a shameless person in this world. Dao Ling and Shirtian were slightly embarrassed as well. A year? Invincible? Needless to say, that was quite exaggerated. Meanwhile, the Southern Territory Lord spoke solemnly, Young Master Yi, I don't really want to get involved in the matter between you and the Culpa Lord. Yi Xian nodded, I know and understand. However, if you're willing to help. The Southern Territory Lord shook his head, I'm sorry, I don't want to get involved. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Yi Xian remained silent on the spot. A short while later Yi Xian said, Let's go. The three of them were about to leave when an old man suddenly appeared before them. The old man wore a loose linen robe and had a wine gourd hanging from his waist. The old man smiled, Wait. Yi Xian gazed at the old man, Senior, you're? The old man smiled, Old man, the Northern Territory Lord. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, Senior, do you need something? The old man nodded and smiled, Young friend, I heard everything you said to the Southern Territory Lord. He isn't willing to help you and your brothers, but I am. Come, let's go to the Northern Territory. Yi Xian and the others exchanged glances. In the end Yi Xian spoke in a low voice, Why? The old man roared with laughter, I'm willing to owe all of you a favor. I believe that even though it's worthless now, it'll definitely be worth a fortune in the future. Yi Xian smiled, Senior, I might have exaggerated a little when I said I'd be invincible in a year. The old man blinked, That's your problem. In any case, I'm only responsible for protecting all of you for a year. I guarantee that the Culpa Lord won't be able to cause trouble for you during that year. After that, I won't care about it anymore. After all, the power behind that Culpa Lord isn't simple, and I don't want to offend it. Yishan nodded. Deal. The Northern Territory Lord smiled. Come, let's go to the Northern Territory. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the horizon. Yishan brought Dao Ling and Shirtian along with him. Before long they arrived at the northern region. Within a stone palace, the Northern Domain's Domain Lord smiled and said, The Tribulation Lord is already here. Yishan frowned. They're already here? The Region Lord of the Northern Region nodded. He has already entered this place. He will arrive at the Northern Region in at most half an hour. As he spoke, he glanced at Yishan and the other two. Is 1 year enough? Yishan nodded. That's enough. The Northern Region Lord nodded. I don't have any cultivation resources, so I can't provide them for you. However, I do have a place to cultivate. If you want to find a place to cultivate, I can provide it for you. Yishan smiled and said, Thank you. The Northern Region Lord suddenly raised his head and looked outside the stone door. He smiled and said, They're here. I'll go meet him. With that, he stood up and left. Within the stone palace, Yishan suddenly said, If we cultivate normally, we definitely won't be able to surpass the time realm in a short time. Our current cultivation realm doesn't have enough time. So, I think the three of us should train together. Dao Ling frowned slightly. Cooperate? Yishan nodded. I've estimated the difference in strength between the three of us and the Tribulation Lord. It's not too big. If we cooperate well, we have a chance to kill him. And to cooperate, we need to know each other's trump cards and moves. Only then will we be able to cooperate perfectly. Dao Ling suddenly said, I have no problem. Shirtian also said, I also have no problem. Yishan nodded slightly. Then I'll go first. My strongest trump card is severing the future, severing the past, severing the present. Soon, inside the stone palace, the three of them began to introduce their trump cards and trump cards. Outside the stone house, the Tribulation Lord looked at the Northern Region Lord with a calm expression. Sir, do you really want to interfere in this matter? The Northern Region Lord smiled. Tribulation Lord, I'm a little curious. You should know that the three of them aren't simple, so why are you targeting them? Aren't you afraid of the Great Tao? The Tribulation Lord said indifferently, That's our business. The Northern Region Lord smiled. Looks like there's nothing to talk about. The Tribulation Lord looked at the Northern Region Lord. Northern Region Lord, I advise you not to interfere in this matter. Not to mention you, even the entire primordial god land can't bear the consequences. The Northern Region Lord's eyes narrowed. Is that so? The Tribulation Lord's expression was calm. Since we can't talk, then we'll fight. With that, he vanished on the spot. The Northern Region Lord laughed. That's exactly what I wanted. With that, he vanished on the spot. On the other side, the Southern Region Lord was watching the battle between the Northern Region Lord and the Tribulation Lord, and a middle-aged man was standing by his side. It was the Eastern Region Lord. The Eastern Region Lord spoke softly. This old fox from the north never does anything that causes him to lose out. He actually went head-on against the Tribulation Lord for the sake of those three youths. The Southern Region Lord's expression was calm. Don't you think those three youths are really extraordinary? The Eastern Region Lord nodded. They are extraordinary indeed. Even during the primeval times they were true geniuses. But, it's those people who are targeting them. The Southern Region Lord fell silent. The Eastern Region Lord glanced at the Southern Region Lord and smiled. What are you thinking about? The Southern Region Lord shook his head slightly. I was slightly tempted when that youth asked me for help, and I wanted to form a good relationship with him. But, as he spoke, he shook his head once more. I'm still fearful. The Tribulation Lord isn't terrifying, but the people behind him are. If I help that youth, then even though I can form a good relationship with him, I'll form a bad relationship with those people behind him. The Eastern Region Lord nodded slightly. Those people are indeed terrifying. As he spoke, he looked at the Northern Region Lord in the distance. This old guy knows about those people, but he still dares to do this. What gives him the right to do this? Isn't it simple? At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. The two turned to look. Not far away, a beautiful woman was slowly walking towards them. This person was the Western Region Lord. The Western Region Lord chuckled. Everyone, what do you think the three of us want to do the most right now? The Eastern Region Lord frowned slightly. Of course it's to transcend time. As he spoke, his pupils suddenly shrank. That youth can help him transcend time? The Southern Region Lord frowned slightly. That's impossible. The Western Region Lord shook his head and smiled. Why is it impossible? I think it's completely possible. The Eastern Region Lord was puzzled. Why? The Western Region Lord said softly, intuition. The Southern Region Lord and the Northern Region Lord's expressions instantly froze. The Western Region Lord shook his head and smiled. Actually, I really admire that old guy from the Northern Region. He really has the guts and he dares to fight. The Eastern Region Lord said lightly, he dares to fight, but if he doesn't succeed, I'm afraid he'll lose his life. The Western Region Lord turned to look at the horizon and said softly, but what if he succeeds? What if that young man can really bring him a great opportunity? The three fell into silence. Inside the stone hall, Yi Xian and the other two began to have an in-depth discussion. They exchanged their experiences in cultivation and martial arts. Needless to say, the three of them benefited greatly from the discussion. The three of them had different fighting styles, and their use of various powers was also different. Dao Ling focused on the Law and Dao, which was the all-elephants Dharma body that he mainly cultivated. Shi Tian, on the other hand, focused on pure speed and strength. He did not have any fixed moves and he did not have many martial arts techniques. He only focused on speed and strength. As for Yi Xian, he was a swordsman. His sword was different from other swordsmen. His sword was based on craftiness and darkness, and it focused on surprise and killing in one move. After the three of them discussed, they all understood something. After a long time, the three of them began to try to learn from each other. More accurately, they were practicing their coordination. With their current strength, if they wanted to kill the Tribulation Lord, they had to cooperate perfectly. And this was not difficult for them. Outside the stone hall. In the void, the Tribulation Lord and the Northern Region Lord suddenly stopped. The Tribulation Lord looked at the Northern Region Lord with an ugly expression. He realized that he could not do anything to this Northern Region Lord. The Northern Region Lord smiled. Tribulation Lord, you can't do anything to me and I don't want to kill you. You should go back. The Tribulation Lord stared at the Northern Region Lord. Northern Region Lord, are you really going to interfere in this matter? The Northern Region Lord smiled. I won't hide it from you. I want to fight. Even if I lose in the end, I will have no regrets. The Tribulation Lord shook his head. You'll definitely lose. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and then a transmission talisman suddenly vanished. The Northern Region Lord's eyes instantly narrowed when he witnessed this scene. Obviously, the Tribulation Lord had called for help. The Tribulation Lord had a calm expression on his face. Northern Region Lord, you'll regret this. The Northern Region Lord roared with laughter. Let's wait and see. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The Tribulation Lord's expression was calm, and no one knew what he was thinking. Below, the Lord of the Northern Region had returned to his own stone hall. There was a scroll in front of his desk. He opened the scroll and all the information about Yi Xian was within it. It was very complete. Meanwhile, an old man appeared by the Northern Region Lord's side, and he spoke in a low voice. Regional Lord, we're making a huge bet this time. The Northern Region Lord spoke softly. If I don't obtain a huge fortuitous encounter, then my life will come to an end. Besides waiting for death, there's nothing else I can do. What's the point of living like that? The old man hesitated for a moment and said, will that young man really be able to help us? The Northern Region Lord spoke softly. I don't know. All I know is that he's that person's son. The old man was slightly puzzled. Who? A trace of fear suddenly appeared in the Northern Region Lord's eyes. That swordsman. That terrifying swordsman who made me feel like I was dead just by looking at me all those years ago. A ferocious expression flashed through his eyes as he spoke. I'm going to bet. I'm betting that this young man is an extraordinarily formidable second generation. Damn it. My life has come to an end, and if I don't ride on someone powerful, how can I improve further? Even if I lose this bet, I have no regrets. The old man was speechless. 2 hours later, Dao Ling and Shi Tian appeared before the Tribulation Lord. Dao Ling gazed at the Tribulation Lord. Let's fight again. The Tribulation Lord's eyes narrowed slightly. Then what about Yi Xian? Dao Ling frowned. Just the two of us will fight you. The Tribulation Lord spoke furiously. Fight my ass. Tell the Yi Xian to come out. I won't fight the two of you if he doesn't. As soon as he finished speaking, he retreated explosively. Dao Ling was speechless. Chapter 2251. The Tribulation Lord was very clearly aware that Yi Xian was definitely plotting something since he was hiding in the shadows. Even though he hadn't known Yi Xian for long, he knew that the young man was an extremely sinister person. But now, the young man hadn't shown himself, so it was very obvious that the young man intended to play some sort of trick. After the loss he'd suffered last time, he didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian's group anymore. After all, their joint forces could threaten his life. The Tribulation Lord was still quite worried, and he moved 3 kilometers back. It didn't take long for his divine sense to sweep out like a net, and it instantly covered an area of a few million kilometers. However, he still didn't notice Yi Xian. The Tribulation Lord frowned slightly. "Where is he?" Dao Ling hesitated for a moment and said, "He's fled." The Tribulation Lord glared angrily at Dao Ling. "What nonsense! Do you think I would believe that?" Dao Ling was speechless. "Damn it. That bastard isn't falling for it." The Tribulation Lord was still looking vigilantly at the surroundings because he couldn't rest at ease so long as Yi Xian didn't show himself. Moreover, his intuition told him that something was off. What? After Yi Xian's group of 3 had been blasted into pieces by him, they'd been constantly on the run. Yet now they'd actually dared to show themselves in front of him. What did that mean? It meant that they might have a way to deal with him. When he thought up to here, the Tribulation Lord didn't hesitate to turn around and vanish into the horizon. He wasn't a rash fellow, so he naturally had to flee when he sensed that something was off. Dao Ling and Shirtian were stunned when they saw the Tribulation Lord flee. He fled just like that? Meanwhile, Yi Xian appeared here, and he frowned slightly as he looked up into the sky. The Tribulation Lord's actions surprised him. He hadn't expected that the Tribulation Lord would actually flee just like that. Dao Ling spoke solemnly, "Brother Yi, what should we do now?" Yi Xian shook his head and felt quite helpless. If the Tribulation Lord was determined to flee, then the 3 of them would really be helpless against him. After all, it was too difficult to keep an expert at such a level from escaping. Meanwhile, the Northern Territory Region Lord appeared here. He looked up into the sky and spoke softly. He called for help just now, and it won't be long before that person behind him shows up. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, we have to go." The Northern Region Lord looked at Yi Xian. "Leave?" Yi Xian nodded. "Staying here will only implicate you. Of course, the 3 of us will always remember Senior's help." He knew that the Northern Region Lord was very strong, but if they stayed here they would definitely implicate the entire Northern region. The Northern Region Lord wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, "We have decided." The Northern Region Lord spoke in a low voice, "All of you can head to the Primeval Shrine. If all of you are able to enter it, then the Tribulation Lord and those behind him might not be able to do anything to all of you." Yi Xian frowned. "Primordial Shrine?" The Northern Region Lord nodded slightly. "Yes, that is a forbidden area here. No one dares to enter that place, including the 4 domain lords. But I think that if you go there, there shouldn't be a problem." Yi Xian smiled and asked, "Why?" The Northern Region Lord spoke solemnly, "All of you possess the karmic luck of the Grand Tao." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Then let's give it a try." The Northern Region Lord nodded. "Head south, and the Primeval Shrine is 5,000 kilometers away." Yi Xian cupped his fists and smiled, "Senior, we'll meet again." As soon as he finished speaking, he led Dao Ling and Qing Er away. Suddenly Yi Xian stopped and said, "Senior, do you have any wishes?" The Northern Region Lord was slightly stunned, and then he hurriedly said, "Transcend time." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I'll help you fulfill that wish right now." The Northern Region Lord was stunned. "Right now?" Yi Xian nodded. "Right now. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I'll forget about it once I leave this place." The Northern Region Lord was speechless. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and spoke softly, "Qing Er, I know you can hear me. This senior isn't bad. Give him a fortuitous encounter." Boom. The spacetime above the Northern Region Lord's head suddenly split open, and a ray of white light entered the Northern Region Lord's head. Rumble. The Northern Region Lord's body shook violently as countless information surged into his mind. After a long time, the Northern Region Lord suddenly opened his eyes, and his body trembled with excitement. "So that's how it is. So that's how it is." In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, take care." As soon as he finished speaking, he walked towards the distance. The Northern Region Lord suddenly bowed deeply. "Thank you, young Master Yi." "Young Master Yi." In that instant, he understood that there was an extremely terrifying existence behind Yi Xian. How terrifying. It was indescribable. Yi Xian and the other two vanished into the distance. The northern region lord immediately turned around and left. He had a new direction now, and transcending time was only a matter of time. In the distance, Dao Ling, who was beside Yi Xian, suddenly said, "Brother Yi, I know you want to rely on yourself, but can you ask your sister to help me? I don't want to rely on myself anymore." Yi Xian was speechless. Dao Ling said seriously, "Brother Yi, I'm serious." Shi Tian hesitated for a moment and then he said, "Brother Dao Ling, you shouldn't think like that. We have to rely on ourselves. It's only meaningful to become strong through our own cultivation." Dao Ling sighed softly. "You don't know about Brother Ye's cheating devices. Whoever uses them will love them." Yi Xian was speechless. Right at this moment, the Southern Region Lord, Eastern Region Lord, and Western Region Lord appeared before Yi Xian and the other two. The Southern Region Lord cupped his fists and said, "Yi Company." Yi Xian smiled. "What's the matter?" The Southern Region Lord said in a low voice, "Young Master Yi, the Northern Region Lord has just entered closed-door cultivation." Yi Xian blinked. "What does that have to do with you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he led the three of them and vanished. The Southern Region Lord and the other two had extremely unsightly expressions on their faces. It didn't take long for them to arrive at a wasteland. A huge hall stood towering at the end of the wasteland. The hall was over 1 kilometer tall, and it was a magnificent sight. Moreover, it carried a trace of an ancient aura. The three of them walked towards the primeval divine hall. All along the way, Yi Xian and the other two frowned, because they'd noticed numerous corpses of demon beasts all along the way. Some of these corpses were very old, but some were very new. Moreover, these corpses only had bones and no flesh. Yi Xian and the other two exchanged glances and became vigilant. After walking for a short while, the three of them suddenly stopped. Not far in front of them on the right there was a small slope, and behind the small slope, there was a youth squatting there. The youth had very long hair, and it had already reached his waist, and it was very messy like a chicken coop. In front of him was a huge demonic beast corpse, and at this moment the youth was crazily eating the meat of the demonic beast corpse. He was eating demon beasts, and he was eating them raw. Yi Xian and the other two exchanged glances, and they were slightly shocked. Dao Ling spoke in a low voice, "This brother really has strong tastes." Right at this moment, the young man suddenly turned around to look at Dao Ling. As soon as he turned around, Yi Xian and the other two saw the young man's appearance. The young man's eyes were suffused with a ferocious glow. The young man stomped his feet on the ground and the entire ground collapsed. Meanwhile, he relied on the terrifying force to leap up and pounce towards Dao Ling like a wolf pouncing on its prey. Dao Ling frowned slightly. "What's wrong with you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward. Rumble. The space in the surroundings suddenly shook violently, and then both of them retreated explosively. After Dao Ling stopped, a wisp of a solemn expression flashed through his eyes, and he gazed at the young man in the distance. "His physical body is so terrifying." Yi Xian glanced at the young man. He noticed it as well. The young man seems to be a body cultivator. Right at this moment, Shi Tian spoke abruptly. "He possesses karmic luck of the Grand Tao as well." Yi Xian and Shi Tian were stunned when they heard this. Shi Tian gazed at the young man in the distance that was filled with hostility, and he spoke in a low voice, "I never expected that there would be someone here that possesses karmic luck of the Grand Tao." Yi Xian was slightly curious. "How did you notice?" Shi Tian spoke in a low voice, "I have a secret technique called the aura observation technique that allows me to observe karmic luck. The karmic luck on this person is the karmic luck of the Grand Tao. He's the same as us." Dao Ling frowned slightly. "We both possess karmic luck of the Grand Tao, so we're on the same side. Why is he so hostile towards us?" Yi Xian rolled his eyes at Dao Ling. "I'm afraid you're an idiot. It's precisely because we both possess karmic luck of the Grand Tao that he's hostile towards us." Dao Ling instantly came to an understanding when he heard this. He'd actually almost forgotten that they were fighting for karmic luck of the Grand Tao. Shi Tian spoke in a low voice, "This fellow wants to kill us." Yi Xian glanced at the young man, and the young man's eyes were filled with killing intent. Yi Xian spoke abruptly, "Beat him up first." As soon as he finished speaking, the three of them vanished on the spot. In the distance, the young man was stunned. In the next moment, he roared furiously and charged forward. Numerous explosions resounded incessantly in the surroundings, and it wasn't long before the young man was beaten up. After a short moment, Yi Xian's group of three stopped, and all of them were slightly shocked, because they noticed that the young man's body was extraordinarily terrifying. The joint forces of the three of them were actually unable to break through the young man's defenses. Dao Ling glanced at his right hand. His right hand had split apart, but the young man in the distance was completely unharmed. Of course, it wasn't good for the young man as well. After all, he'd been beaten up by the joint forces of the three of them. He wasn't injured, but it didn't look good. Shirtian spoke abruptly in a low voice. He seems to only know how to hit randomly. Yishen nodded because he'd noticed it as well. The young man before them had been completely disorganized when they'd fought earlier, and he'd been hitting randomly. If it wasn't for his body being too abnormal, then the three of them would have been able to instantly annihilate him with ease. Perhaps they could break through the young man's defenses with the green profound sword in their possession. But now, according to the degree of the young man's defense was abnormal, they would probably be unable to do anything to the young man even if they struck him 100 times. What a freak. Of course, if the three of them were to really go all out, they should be able to exhaust the young man to death. In the distance, the young man stared at Yishen and the other two with a ferocious expression. The next moment he suddenly leaped and directly crashed into Yishen and the other two. Yishen said calmly, "Use some force. Let him know why the flowers are red." After that, the three of them disappeared on the spot at the same time. This time, the three of them didn't fight the young man head-on. Rumble, rumble, rumble. In the field, the young man was being brutally beaten by Yishen and the other two. Faced with the perfect cooperation of Yishen and the other two, the young man had no strength to fight back at all. He could only passively take the beating. Just like that, the three of them brutally beat the young man for nearly 15 minutes before stopping. After stopping, the young man's hands trembled. He glared at Yishen and the other two and roared, "One-on-one." "One-on-one?" Yishen said seriously, "Brother, times have changed. Now it's about numbers. Unity is power. Haven't you heard of it?" The young man was speechless. Chapter 2252. Ganging up on him. The young man's expression turned ferocious when he heard Yishen's words. He roared furiously and charged at Yishen. Yishen's expression was calm. Beat him up. The three of them vanished on the spot. Rumble. Numerous explosions resounded incessantly in the surroundings. The three of them were very powerful. The energy that leaked out directly cracked the ground around them. However, the surrounding spacetime was completely unharmed. Vicious beatings. The young man did not even have the strength to fight back. He was beaten up. It was hard to say if it was one-on-one. However, 3-on-1 was like a father beating his son. About 15 minutes later, Yishen's group of three stopped. The young man's expression was extremely ugly. He roared madly at Yishen's group of three as if he had gone mad. He kept shouting, "One-on-one." Yishen said calmly, "Continue beating him up." The three of them vanished on the spot once again. The young man was speechless. Just like that, Yishen's group of three beat up the young man for a full hour. The young man did not have the strength to fight back at all during this hour. Although his physical body was really terrifying, he could not withstand this beating. After all, the pain was still there. After a long time, Yishen's group of three stopped. The young man glanced at Yishen's group of three. Although there was still anger in his eyes, he had calmed down overall. Yishen smiled. "What's your name?" The young man stared fixedly at Yishen and did not speak. Yishen said solemnly, "No discord, no concord. Let's be friends." Dao Ling and Shirkin's expressions froze. The young man broke through their defenses and roared, "Scram!" As he spoke, his blood surged and he was about to charge at Yishen's group of three. However, he quickly calmed down. He suddenly remembered that he was not a match for the three of them. Yishen smiled faintly. "You should have already discovered our identities. That's right, we are the possessors of the great path luck. Now you have two choices. 1. Join us. 2. The three of us kill you and divide the great path luck on you." The youth beside Yishen, Dao Ling said in a low voice, "Brother Yi, are you trying to rope him in?" Yishen said seriously, "Think about it. What do we lack the most right now? He was a meat shield. If he joins us, with him taking the brunt of the damage, won't it be much easier for us?" Dao Ling blinked and gave a thumbs up. "Brilliant. It's too high." Shirtian hesitated for a moment before he said, "He might not join us." Yishen smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll bluff. Oh no, I'll have a good talk with him. You see, this brother has a bad temper and gets angry at the slightest provocation. One look and you can tell that he's a simple-minded person. This kind of honest person is the best to bluff, the best to talk to." Shirtian and the other man were speechless. Yi Xian glanced at the corpse of the gigantic demon beast in the distance and walked towards it. The youth's expression instantly changed drastically when he saw this, and he roared furiously, "It's mine!" Yi Xian glared at the youth. "What do you mean mine? Good things should be shared, understand?" The youth, Yi Xian, walked over to the demon beast's corpse and sized it up. He was slightly shocked in his heart because he noticed that the demon beast's corpse wasn't simple at all. It was filled with abundant energy. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it. He started a fire and started roasting the meat. Yi Xian was extremely skilled in cooking and roasting. Moreover, he brought a lot of ingredients with him. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to roast the demon beast's meat until it was golden yellow. Moreover, it was extremely fragrant. Dao Ling and Shirtian sat down by Yi Xian's side, and then they started to tear apart the meat and eat it. In the distance, the youth stared fixedly at Yi Xian's group of three. His gaze seemed like he wished for nothing more than to eat the meat of Yi Xian's group of three. However, his gaze would occasionally glance at the roasted meat in front of Yi Xian's group. Dao Ling suddenly exclaimed in admiration, "Brother Yi, your culinary skills aren't bad." Shi Tian nodded. "Sure." Yi Xian laughed heartily. Then he picked up a piece of roasted meat and passed it to the youth. "Do you want some?" The youth stared at Yi Xian and didn't speak. Yi Xian smiled and pointed with his finger. The piece of roasted meat landed steadily in front of the youth. The youth was slightly hesitant. Yi Xian smiled. "It's not good to eat raw meat. Meat should be roasted." The youth looked at the roasted meat in front of him. His throat rolled, but he still endured it. Yi Xian smiled. "Try it." The youth fell silent for a long time. In the end, he couldn't bear it anymore. He picked up the roasted meat and started chewing. In an instant, he finished the roasted meat. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's group of three was stunned. Why was this guy like a beast? After he finished chewing, the youth looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Come over and eat with us." The youth looked at Yi Xian with vigilance in his eyes. Yi Xian smiled. "If we had any ill intentions towards you, we wouldn't be sitting here talking nonsense with you. The three of us are good people. Very good people." The youth hesitated for a while. Then he walked over to Yi Xian and sat down. He glanced at the three of them. Yi Xian nodded. The youth picked up the roasted meat from the rack and started chewing. In less than 2 breaths of time, the roasted meat that was the size of an adult was completely devoured by the youth. Not even the bones were left. Yi Xian's group of three was dumbfounded. What the hell was this guy doing? After the youth finished chewing, he looked at Yi Xian and pointed at the corpse of the demon beast in the distance. "Continue roasting it." Yi Xian was speechless. The youth moved the demon beast corpse in front of Yi Xian and let him roast it. Yi Xian was speechless. He didn't refuse and continued roasting. The youth looked at Yi Xian silently, his saliva dripping down. Yi Xian suddenly smiled and asked, "I'm Yi Xian. The two beside me are called Dao Ling and Shirtian. What's your name?" The youth's gaze was still fixed on the roasted meat. "Heaven's abandonment." Yi Xian frowned. "Heaven's abandonment?" The youth stared at the roasted meat and didn't speak. Yi Xian sized up Heaven's abandonment. It had to be said that Heaven's abandonment was very sloppy. He was no different from a wild beast. It was obvious that he had lived here alone for a very long time. Moreover, he didn't understand the ways of the world. At this moment, the meat was done roasting. As soon as it was done, Heaven's abandonment picked it up and started eating. Soon, the entire demon beast was eaten clean by him. After that, Heaven's abandonment looked at Yi Xian. At this moment, the hostility in his eyes lessened. Yi Xian smiled. "Do you want to go with us?" Heaven's abandonment frowned. "Go." Yi Xian nodded. "Go outside and have a look." Heaven's abandonment was silent for a long time. He said, "There's food here." Yi Xian smiled. "There's food outside too. Moreover, there's a lot of food." Heaven's abandonment shook his head. "I won't go." Yi Xian didn't understand. "Why?" Heaven's abandonment said, "Father is here." "Father?" Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. "Your father is here?" Heaven's abandonment nodded. He turned and pointed at a small hill in the distance. Yi Xian glanced at the hill. In next to no time he frowned. A demon beast was buried within the hill. Yi Xian looked at Heaven's abandonment. This fellow is a demon beast? In next to no time he noticed that this fellow really was a demon beast. Dao Ling and Shirtian noticed this as well. No wonder this fellow's body is so strong. Heaven's abandonment suddenly said, "Father told me to be careful of all of you." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "All of us?" Heaven's abandonment nodded. He said to be careful of those that have the same smell as me. Obviously he was talking about the karmic luck of the Grand Tao. Yixin smiled. What do you think? Heaven's abandonment glanced at Yixin. You're not a good person. Yixin was speechless. Heaven's abandonment suddenly stood up. He turned around and walked over to the hill, and then he lay down before the hill and started to sleep. Shirtian spoke abruptly from the side. The bloodline of the demon beast buried within the hill is different from his. Yixin spoke solemnly. In other words, it isn't his biological father that's buried there? Shirtian nodded. Obviously Heaven's abandonment wasn't simple at all. Dao Ling suddenly asked, are we still taking him with us? Yixin spoke softly. Do you think the Tribulation Lord would let him go if he were to stay here and be noticed by him? Dao Ling spoke softly. That's true. Yixin walked over to Heaven's abandonment, squatted down and said, do you want to leave? Heaven's abandonment hesitated for a moment, and then he said, yes. Yixin said with a smile, then come with us. We have enough meat. Heaven's abandonment turned around to glance at the hill behind him. Yixin smiled, that's easy. As he spoke, he withdrew a spatial ring and moved the entire hill into it. After that, he passed the spatial ring to Heaven's abandonment. Heaven's abandonment was stunned, and then he said, inside. Yixin nodded. Heaven's abandonment hurriedly put the spatial ring on his hand, and then he rubbed it lightly while a wisp of sorrow flashed through his eyes. Yixin suddenly said, you have to dress yourself up. As he spoke, he waved his hand lightly, and all the dirt on Heaven's abandonment was swept away. After that, he withdrew a black robe and put it on Heaven's abandonment. On the other hand, half of Heaven's abandonment's hair had been cut off. It didn't take long for a completely new Heaven's abandonment to appear before Yixin's group of three. Needless to say, Heaven's abandonment had undergone a tremendous change after he dressed himself up and cleaned himself up. Heaven's abandonment was very handsome, but he was slightly cold. His eyes were crimson red and there was a very deep scar on his chest. Yixin glanced at the scar and he was slightly shocked. He'd experienced how formidable Heaven's abandonment's body was, yet someone had actually been able to injure his body? Yixin pointed at the scar on Heaven's abandonment's chest and said, who did this? Heaven's abandonment shook his head, I don't know. Yixin frowned slightly. He's been here since he was young? Heaven's abandonment nodded. Yixin fell silent for a moment, and then he nodded slightly, come with us. Heaven's abandonment glanced at Yixin, there's enough meat, right? Yixin roared with laughter, yes. Heaven's abandonment nodded, all right. Yixin led the three of them towards the primeval shrine. On the way, Heaven's abandonment suddenly gazed at Yixin, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, can I have some of your meat? Yixin's face instantly darkened when he heard this. Damn it. This fellow actually wants to eat me? Dao Ling suddenly roared with laughter. Yixin glared at Dao Ling and then he said, Heaven's abandonment is strong in terms of defense and physical strength, but his techniques are too weak. If he encounters a top-rate expert, then he'll definitely suffer a loss. We have to teach him how to fight. Dao Ling, I'll leave this glorious task to you. Dao Ling's face instantly darkened when he heard this. Chapter 2253. It didn't take long for the three of them to arrive at the primeval shrine. The door to the shrine was over 30 m wide, and there were a few dozen enormous stone pillars that were as thick as an adult's body before it. There were some hideous demon beasts drawn on the stone pillars. Yixin took a look at the hall in front of him. The entire hall was filled with an ancient aura. Dao Ling spoke solemnly, Brother Yi, this place isn't simple at all. Tianqi spoke abruptly, it's dangerous. Yixin gazed at Tianqi, have you been here? Tianqi hesitated for a moment, and then he shook his head, I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare. Yixin fell silent. He knew that demon beasts were very sensitive to danger. Since Tianqi hadn't dared to come here, then it was obvious that this place was very dangerous. Moreover, he himself felt quite uneasy right now. It was very dangerous. Right at this moment, the four of them suddenly turned around and saw two extremely terrifying auras sweeping towards them from afar. One of them belonged to the Culpa Lord, and the other was much stronger than the Culpa Lord. Yixin immediately said, let's go in. As soon as he finished speaking, he pushed open the door to the shrine and led the four of them in. As soon as they entered, the Tribulation Lord and a middle-aged man appeared at the entrance of the shrine. The Tribulation Lord was just about to enter when the middle-aged man stopped him. The Tribulation Lord gazed at the middle-aged man, Master Yun? The middle-aged man called Master Yun shook his head slightly. It's dangerous. The Tribulation Lord spoke solemnly. I know, but they've entered. Master Yun's expression was calm. Wait. The Tribulation Lord hesitated for a moment before he said, my suggestion is that we don't give them a chance. Their strength increases explosively every once in a while. Master Yun didn't answer the Tribulation Lord. He frowned slightly as he gazed at the shrine, and there was a trace of fear and bewilderment in his eyes. There was a trace of worry in the Tribulation Lord's eyes as he gazed at the shrine. It was very dangerous. He felt that it was very dangerous as well, but Yi Xian's group had entered. After they entered the shrine, Yi Xian turned around and noticed that the Tribulation Lord and the middle-aged man hadn't followed them in. Obviously this place was really dangerous. Yi Xian looked around. The place where they came in was a courtyard. It was very big and it was all paved with bluestone. In the middle of the courtyard there was a tree that was almost withered. The surroundings were silent, abnormally silent. At this moment Tianqi's body suddenly trembled slightly. Yi Xian looked at Tianqi. What's wrong? Tianqi clenched his fists and his eyes were filled with vigilance. Danger. Danger. At the side Dao Ling also said in a low voice, Brother Yi, I feel a little uneasy. It's very strong. Yi Xian suddenly asked, is it as dangerous as my sister's sword? Dao Ling hesitated for a moment before he said, no. Yi Xian blinked. Then what are you afraid of? Dao Ling thought about it and said, now that you mention it, I don't think I'm nervous anymore. Shi Tian suddenly said, because Brother Yi is here, his sister might not kill you but here. Dao Ling was speechless. Shi Tian glanced at the withered tree in the distance. Brother Yi, there's something wrong with this tree. Yi Xian nodded. I can see that. Shi Tian hesitated for a moment before he said, why don't we head out? I can see the danger outside but the danger here. I can't see it. Yi Xian thought about it and said, it's fine. I'll take care of it first. As he spoke, he walked towards the withered tree. Shi Tian suddenly pulled Yi Xian back and shook his head. It's dangerous. Yi Xian nodded. I know. Then what do you think our chances are if we head out and fight the Culpa Lord? Shi Tian shook his head. I don't know. I don't know. Yi Xian smiled. Someone once read my fortune, and he said that my fate is very strong, and it's very difficult for me to die. As he finished speaking, he walked towards the withered tree. Dao Ling suddenly said in a trembling voice, Brother Yi, who read your fortune? Is it reliable? Yi Xian roared with laughter. I think it's probably reliable. As he spoke, he walked over to the withered tree and sat down. Not too long ago, I told my younger sister not to suppress the Daebi. I want to rely on myself to walk down the path of the Grand Tao. When he spoke up to here, he shook his head lightly. We possess the karmic luck of the Grand Tao, yet we feel that you're very dangerous. Obviously, you're definitely a peerless great figure. We brothers have no ill intent when we enter this hall today, and we merely want to see if we're able to take you as our master. If we're able to take you as our master, then we'll definitely bring Senior's inheritance to glory. He paused for a moment as he spoke up to here, and then he said, even though I really want to be humble, it's a pity that my strength doesn't allow me to do so. Amongst the monstrous geniuses in the outside world, there's no one that's more outstanding than us brothers. If Senior intends to leave behind an inheritance or pass on the Tao, then I think that us brothers are very suitable. There was no reply. Dao Ling hesitated for a moment, and then he said, Shi Tian, do you think Brother Yi will be able to do it? Shi Tian shook his head. I don't know. In the distance Yi Xian bowed slightly. Senior, if you don't say anything, then it means that you've agreed. As soon as he finished speaking, he hurriedly turned around to look at Dao Ling and the others. Quickly bow and take him as your master. Dao Ling and Shi Tian were slightly stunned. What's this? He's taking him as his master just like that? Yi Xian didn't say anything else and he directly bowed slightly. Greetings, master. His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when a terrifying aura suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian was shocked in his heart, but his expression was very calm because the person hadn't attacked him directly. Meanwhile, the tree suddenly started trembling. In the next moment, a voice resounded from within the tree. Young man, you're really shameless. Yi Xian was speechless. The voice continued. What makes you think that I won't kill you? Yi Xian immediately said, there's no reason. The voice said, the karmic luck of the Grand Tao that all four of you possess is extremely beneficial to me as well. Yi Xian laughed heartily. The voice said, what are you laughing at? Yi Xian laughed. I'm laughing because Senior is joking with me. With Senior's strength, why would you care about this insignificant karmic luck? Not to mention this insignificant karmic luck, even the deity wouldn't be able to do anything to Senior. The voice fell silent. Yi Xian said again, Senior, you're able to make the four of us feel uneasy with just your aura alone. With such strength, I'm afraid that even the deity would have to bow his head in submission when he sees your excellency. The voice suddenly laughed. Young man, you're really good at flattering. Yi Xian bowed slightly. What Junior said is what I think. There's not a single word of falsehood. The voice laughed. The deity's ability is much more terrifying than you can imagine. Of course, as you said, I'm really not too afraid of it. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Senior, do the four of us have the honor of becoming your disciple? The voice fell silent. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Junior understands. Saying so, he sighed in a low voice. It's a great regret that I couldn't become Senior's disciple. The voice suddenly said, Young man, if it was in the past, I would have been willing to accept the four of you. After all, the four of you are monsters among monsters. Moreover, your temperament is to my liking. Unfortunately, the current me. At this point, he didn't continue speaking. Yi Xian asked in a deep voice, Senior, are you still alive? The voice laughed. What do you think? Yi Xian shook his head. I think no one in this world can kill Senior unless Senior wants to die. Otherwise, who can hurt Senior? Ah. The voice suddenly laughed. Little guy, although I know you're flattering me, I have to say that it's really nice to hear. Yi Xian smiled slightly. Senior, when we four brothers came in just now, we were a bit uneasy. We thought Senior was a difficult person to talk to, but now it seems we were overthinking. The voice said, Just now, you were uneasy because I don't want anyone to disturb me. However, I'm a bit curious about the four of you. Logically speaking, the four of you should be enemies with each other, but now it seems you're on the same side. Yi Xian smiled. Because we have a stronger enemy. The voice said, The two outside? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. I wonder if Senior has heard of that Tribulation Lord. This person is known as the Myriad Tribulation Ancestor, invincible in the universe. The voice suddenly said disdainfully. What bullshit Myriad Tribulation Ancestor? Invincible in the universe? Did he say that? Yi Xian hurriedly nodded. Yes. That day when he bullied us three brothers, he told us that he was invincible and we could do whatever we wanted. What bullshit is that? The voice was filled with disdain. It's just a bolt of tribulation lightning that has developed intelligence and attained initial success in cultivation. He actually dares to say that he's invincible. He's truly a frog at the bottom of a well that doesn't know the immensity of the heavens and the earth. Yi Xian spoke solemnly, Senior, that Tribulation Lord is really formidable. Even our joint forces weren't a match for him. When that bolt of tribulation lightning descended, it was simply terrifying. When he spoke up to this point, he paused for a moment before he continued, Of course he's definitely far inferior to Senior. After all, just a strand of Senior's aura was enough to make us four brothers feel uneasy and terrified, but we didn't feel that way when facing that Tribulation Lord. But, that Tribulation Lord is very formidable. The voice said, He's actually just a piece of trash and he's just a lackey of someone else. Even though the three of you are inferior to him now, surpassing him in the future is extremely easy. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Thank you for thinking so highly of us, Senior. The four of us brothers will definitely work hard. He hesitated for a moment as he spoke up to this point, and then he said, Senior, since you're not interested in taking disciples, then we'll be taking our leave. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Dao Ling and the others were slightly stunned, but they still left with Yi Xian in the end. Suddenly the voice said, They're right outside. You'll be in danger if you leave now. Yi Xian nodded. I know. However, we'll probably drag Senior down if we stay here. Once that Tribulation Lord and the others behind him act against Senior. At that time, our consciences wouldn't be able to bear it. The voice suddenly roared with laughter. Little fellow, do you think I'm afraid of them? Yi Xian hesitated to speak. The voice chuckled, Little fellow, just watch. I'll show you what a true expert is like. As soon as the voice finished speaking, a black shadow suddenly appeared in the sky outside the hall, and it looked down at the Tribulation Lord. Trash, like you said that you're invincible throughout the universe? Are you shameless? How dare you speak such arrogant words? A moment later, a huge palm swept down at an extremely swift speed, and the Tribulation Lord wasn't even able to react before he was blasted flying. Rumble. The Tribulation Lord was blasted over 3 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped, his body exploded apart into countless bolts of lightning that shot towards the surroundings. The Tribulation Lord was speechless. P.S. I don't dare to say anything else, but do all of you think that I'm on time? Is there anyone who's more stable and punctual than me? Chapter 22:54. It had to be said that the Tribulation Lord was dumbfounded. What the hell was this? Who was this fellow in front of him? Why did he attack him? In the horizon, the phantom looked down at the Tribulation Lord hundreds of thousands of feet away. It disdainfully said, "What trash?" Tribulation Lord. At the entrance to the hall, Master Cloud looked up at the phantom, his expression calm. "You must be the primal god race's primordial divine tree soul." In the horizon, the phantom looked at Master Cloud and chuckled. "To think you even investigated my origins so thoroughly. You aren't simple at all." Master Cloud chuckled. "Primordial divine tree, our goal is only those 4 people." The primordial divine tree lightly said, "What does that have to do with me?" Master Cloud nodded. "Then I ask you to let them come out." The primordial divine tree mocked, "Why should I?" Master Cloud frowned. The primordial divine tree sneered. "What, you want to fight?" Master Cloud sighed. "We have always respected the primal god race. Primordial divine tree, we must obtain those 4 people. Can you not interfere?" The primordial divine tree laughed. "Are you threatening me or begging me?" After a moment of silence, Master Cloud nodded. "I understand your attitude." With that, he turned and left. He didn't attack because he truly couldn't do anything to the primordial divine tree. At this time, the distant Tribulation Lord trembled. "Primordial divine tree, as far as I know, this is the first time we have met. Since this is the first time we have met, why did you hit me?" The primordial divine tree lightly said, "If I want to hit you, I hit you. You don't agree?" The Tribulation Lord fiercely said, "Was it that Yi Xian? Did he tell you to hit me?" Yi Xian. The primordial divine tree frowned. "Why do you have to spout so much nonsense? If you don't agree, then hit me back." The Tribulation Lord's expression was incomparably fierce. He knew. It was definitely that bastard Yi Xian who was up to no good. That old bastard. On the side, Master Cloud glanced at the Tribulation Lord. "Let's go." With that, he vanished with the Tribulation Lord. The primordial divine tree returned to the hall. At this moment, the eyes of Yi Xian and the others were filled with admiration. Yi Xian said excitedly, "Senior, that Tribulation Lord was like an ant in front of you. Senior, you are amazing." The primordial god tree laughed. "It's not that I'm powerful, it's that the Tribulation Lord is too weak." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Senior, before this, us 4 brothers felt that there were very few in the world who could be a match for us. But now that we've met Senior, we finally know how weak we are." We were shocked by Senior's invincible strength. The primordial god tree laughed. "Little guy, don't keep flattering me, I don't like it, haha." Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, Dao Ling spoke abruptly, "Senior, who's the power standing behind the Tribulation Lord?" The primordial god tree frowned. "Don't you know?" Yi Xian nodded. "I don't know." The primordial god tree fell silent. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, "Is it very strong?" The primordial god tree said, "Very strong. They have a long history even before my primordial god race. Moreover, according to what I know, they've even devoured the people of the previous generations who possessed the destiny of the great Tao." Yi Xian frowned. "They've devoured the previous generations?" The primordial god tree nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Is the destiny of the great Tao so useless? It was actually killed by someone else. This Dedeabi is too cheap." Dedeabi. The primordial god tree laughed. "Possessing the destiny of the great Tao only means that one's destiny becomes extremely good. Apart from that, it doesn't mean anything. But there are some powerhouses that can ignore this so-called destiny, just like the Tribulation Lord and those people behind him." Yi Xian frowned. "Senior, who are those people behind him?" The primordial god tree fell silent. Yi Xian asked, "You can't tell me?" The primordial god tree said, "The Immortal Mausoleum. It's a very, very ancient superfaction. When my primordial god race was still around, we had dealings with them. In truth, I have some doubts. Logically speaking, although your great Tao destiny is good, it shouldn't be of much use to existences like them. This is because they don't have the destiny of the great Tao, so it's impossible for them to compete for it. Although the destiny of the great Tao can be devoured, the effect isn't that great. Unless, Yi Xian suddenly said, unless they also have someone who possesses the destiny of the great Tao. The primordial god tree nodded. If they also have someone who possesses the destiny of the great Tao, then everything makes sense. As it spoke, it glanced at Yi Xian and the others. The four of you have been targeted by them. I'm afraid your days won't be too good. Yi Xian said in a low voice, just how many people possess the destiny of the great Tao? The primordial god tree smiled. I'm not sure about that. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, Senior, can you point us in the right direction? The primordial god tree fell silent. Yi Xian faintly smiled. I was rude. The primordial god tree said in a low voice, little fellow, to tell you the truth, the reason I stayed here is to seek a lucky chance for my primal god race. In the past, because of some special reasons, my race was destroyed. And in these past years, my people have always wanted to rebuild the primal god race and return to our ancestral land, Primordial City. But, because of some special reasons, we cannot return. As it spoke, it glanced at Yi Xian. Little fellow, I know you aren't ordinary. If you agree to bring my primal god race's people back to the primordial god race in the future, then I will bring you 4 brothers to see the souls of my primal god race's ancestors and have them help you 4 brothers. But I must remind you that once you agree, that is the same as accepting an even greater karma. In the past, my primal god race's strength was evenly matched with the immortal mausoleum. Hearing this, Yi Xian and the others fell silent. Evenly matched. And the primal god race had still been destroyed. What did this mean? It meant that the primal god race had provoked an extremely terrifying influence or powerhouse. Yi Xian turned to look at Dao Ling and Shirtian. Both of them were silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, if you aren't going to say anything, then state your stance. Dao Ling hesitated for a moment and then said, Brother Yi, you make the decision. Yi Xian looked at Shirtian. Shirtian nodded. Brother Yi, you decide. Yi Xian looked at Sky Forsaken. Sky Forsaken hesitated for a moment and then said, just give me the meat. Everyone, Yi Xian laughed and then turned to look at the primordial god tree. Senior, we will make this deal. The primordial god tree looked straight at Yi Xian. Are you sure? Yi Xian nodded. Let the future speak for itself. Living in the present is the most important thing. The primordial god tree was silent for a moment and then said, follow me. After saying that, it turned and walked towards the small hall. Yi Xian hurriedly led Dao Ling and the other 2 to follow. On the way, Shirtian said in a deep voice, Brother Yi, why do I feel like we are getting weaker and weaker? It wasn't like this before. Dao Ling also nodded. Yes, before I met Brother Yi, I was already invincible for many years. Ever since I met Brother Yi, I feel weaker by the day. As he said that, he glanced at Yi Xian and then said, Brother Yi, what about you? Yi Xian sternly said, I am the same. Before we were together, I was always invincible. Along the way, I swept away everything and never met a worthy opponent. Dao Ling hesitated for a moment and then said, Really? Yi Xian's face darkened. I am a swordsman. Do you think I would lie? Dao Ling curled his lips. You are a hammer swordsman. After spending time with Yi Xian, he finally realized this. Although Brother Yi was a swordsman, the things he did were completely different from what he imagined a swordsman to be. Shirtian suddenly said, Brother Yi, I feel that this matter with the primordial god race is not as simple as it seems. Yi Xian nodded. I know, but we have no choice. No choice. Shirtian was silent. As Yi Xian said, the 4 of them had no other choice. Before long, everyone entered the small hall. There were some statues in the small hall and the entire hall was very quiet. The primordial god tree slightly bowed towards the leading statue. Patriarch. Kacha. The statue suddenly shattered and an old man appeared in front of Yi Xian and the others. The old man's long hair draped over his shoulders. He wore a large and luxurious robe and there was a dignified air between his eyebrows. The old man looked at Yi Xian and the others in front of him. Those who possessed the destiny of the great Tao. Yi Xian bowed. Greetings, senior. The old man was silent. The primordial god tree hesitated for a moment and then said, Patriarch? The old man said in a soft voice, them. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Besides fighting, what do you want us to help you with? Yi Xian thought for a moment and then said, increase our strength. The old man nodded. What else? Yi Xian blinked. Give us some money. The old man faintly smiled. Money? Yi Xian nodded. "And equipment, of course if you don't have it then we won't force you." The old man said, "I do." As he spoke, he opened his palm and a pitch-black sword appeared in front of Yi Xian. The sword was 4 feet long and 2 fingers wide. It was pitch black all over. Yi Xian blinked. "Senior, this is?" The old man smiled. "The primordial god sword, the #1 divine sword of my primal god race. The blade is forged from divine time metal and can increase the power of time several times over. Not just that, but it also contains the soul of my primal guardian beast. This beast has already transcended time in the past. With its help, the power of your sword skills will multiply." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Are you giving it to me?" The old man nodded. Yi Xian fell silent. The old man suddenly looked at Shirtian. He opened his palm and a pair of arm guards appeared in front of Shirtian. Primordial god arms. These arms were forged from the arms of an ancient variant beast, the Tongbi divine ape. These arms contain the terrifying strength of a divine ape. They suit you very well. Shirtian fell silent. He didn't take them. The old man then looked at Dao Ling. He opened his palm and a black stone appeared in front of Dao Ling. This is a primordial god stone. It can greatly increase the power of one's soul. When you cast a spell, use it as a medium. Not only will the power increase, but the consumption of your soul will also be minimal. Dao Ling didn't take them either. The old man then looked at Tianqi. He hesitated for a moment, then turned to look at Yi Xian. "Are you sure you want him to follow you?" Yi Xian glanced at Tianqi and said, "What's wrong?" The old man sighed. "His background isn't simple. If he follows you, I'm afraid he will bring you endless trouble in the future." Yi Xian smiled. "I'm not afraid." The old man was puzzled. "What?" Yi Xian picked up the primordial god sword and said, "There's no need to worry about too many debts." The old man. Chapter 2255. Karma? Yi Xian knew very well that if he couldn't get through this, everything else would be for naught. He had to get through this first. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Senior, you said Tianqi's origins aren't simple. Can you tell me in detail?" The old man shook his head. "No." Yi Xian was speechless. The old man glanced at Tianqi who was still eating meat and he said in a low voice, "His origins are very extraordinary. As for exactly what his origins are, I'm unable to tell you because I don't want to cause trouble for myself." Yi Xian nodded. "Understood." The old man seemed to have thought of something. He opened his palm and a set of armor appeared in his hand. The old man said in a low voice, "Primal god armor, the strongest defensive divine equipment of my primal god race." As it spoke, the armor slowly floated in front of Tianqi. However, Tianqi was unmoved. In his eyes there was only meat. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Tianqi, quickly pick it up. This is good stuff." Tianqi shook his head. "You can't eat it." Yi Xian's face darkened. "You're really a foodie?" As he spoke, he picked up the primeval divine armor, walked over to Tianqi, and then placed it in Tianqi's hand. "When you fight in the future, utilize this treasure and you'll become even more formidable." Tianqi hesitated for a moment and said, "Really?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'm not lying." Tianqi nodded and then he put the armor away. As soon as the armor entered his hand, it transformed into a strand of black light that entered his body. Boom. Within Tianqi's body, a horrifying aura suddenly swept out. The old man gently waved his right hand, and the aura was immediately dispersed. The old man's right hand suddenly opened and 4 spatial rings slowly floated in front of Yi Xian and the others. Yi Xian glanced at them and was shocked. Each spatial ring actually contained 1 million universe veins. 1 million. Dao Ling and Shirtian looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. Weren't the primal god race far too heroic? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Senior, you're too generous. I'm panicking." The old man smiled and said, "What are you afraid of? In any case, there's no need to worry about more debts, isn't there?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." As he spoke, he put away the spatial ring and said, "Senior, your request is for the 4 of us to lead your primal god race clansmen to Primeval City in the future?" The old man nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian asked, "Where are your people?" The old man looked at Yi Xian. "They are in a very, very safe place. In the future, when your ability reaches a certain level, someone will come looking for you and make you fulfill today's promise." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." The old man smiled faintly. "Little fella, we can't openly help you with your matter with the Immortal Mausoleum, but we can secretly help you. Right now we can help you reach beyond the age of time. Yi Xian was a little curious. Senior, what realm is above flowing time? The old man said, transcend time. As his voice fell, he waved his right hand and dozens of phantoms appeared. The old man said in a low voice, these are the ancestors of my primal god race. Now we will pass on all of our inheritances to you. As for whether or not you can reach beyond the age of time in a short period of time, that will depend on your own good fortune. Yi Xian said, then the immortal mausoleum? The old man said, 3 days? We will help you delay them for 3 days. After 3 days we will no longer interfere. My apologies, but because of our current state, we cannot wage an all-out war with the immortal mausoleum. We can only help you within the limits of our abilities. Yi Xian nodded. I understand. The old man said, then let's begin. Yi Xian turned to look at Dao Ling and the others. Let's compete and see who is faster? Dao Ling laughed. That's exactly what I was thinking. Shirtian also nodded. Sure. The three of them suddenly looked at Heaven Forsaken, who was still eating meat. Heaven Forsaken had an indifferent expression, as if he didn't even know what he was doing. Yi Xian and the others were left speechless. This fellow's heart was too big. The old man suddenly said, then let's begin. Yi Xian nodded. Okay. The old man turned to look at the primal god race ancestor souls and nodded. Soon, everyone began to pass the inheritances to Yi Xian and the others. Transcending time in 3 days? In truth, the 4 of them didn't have any confidence. But they had no path of retreat. Even if they didn't have confidence, they had to brace themselves and do it. At the side, Heaven Forsaken was about to leave when Yi Xian hurriedly stopped him. What are you doing? Heaven Forsaken shook his head. It's not fun. Yi Xian's face darkened. Cultivate according to what they say. Once you succeed, I will give you meat to eat. A lot of meat. Heaven Forsaken hesitated for a moment and then said, really? Yi Xian nodded. Really? Heaven Forsaken immediately nodded. Okay. With that said, he went to receive the inheritance. Yi Xian was speechless. What a glutton. Without thinking too much about it, Yi Xian also began to receive the inheritance. The old man and the primordial god tree left the hall. The old man sat on the stone steps and looked into the distant horizon in silence. The primordial god tree said in a low voice, Patriarch, are you worried? The old man said softly, that youth isn't simple. The primordial god tree nodded. All 4 of them aren't simple. The old man chuckled. What do you think of the youth in the lead? That fellow called Yi Xian. The primordial god tree was silent for a moment before saying, what thick skin? The old man laughed. Is that it? The primordial god tree shook its head and smiled. Patriarch, what are you trying to say? The old man said softly, do you see the other 3 fellows? They're all led by that fellow. The primordial god tree fell silent. The old man shook his head. That little fellow looks flashy on the surface, but he's actually very meticulous and knows how to read people's minds. Of course, the most important thing is that the power behind him isn't simple. I fear it's no weaker than that Heaven Forsaken youth. The primordial god tree said, Patriarch, is that Heaven Forsaken from that race? The old man nodded. Hearing this, the primordial god tree's expression instantly became solemn. He's actually from that race. The old man smiled. I didn't expect that either. As far as I know, a super genius appeared in that race and shocked everyone for a while. Unfortunately, for some reason, that genius suddenly disappeared. At this point, he shook his head. Now it seems that Heaven Forsaken is that youth from back then and he ended up here, the primordial god tree said solemnly. If he really was framed and ended up here, then Yi Xian brought him, the old man said softly. That's great karma. The primordial god tree fell silent. The old man suddenly smiled. This Yi Xian is quite capable. They were originally fated to fight, but he actually gathered them together. The immortal mausoleum is probably in trouble this time. The primordial god tree frowned slightly. Trouble? With their current strength, it's far from enough to threaten the immortal mausoleum. The old man smiled. It's indeed not enough now, but what about the future? These 4 fellows are monstrous beyond our imagination. Let's wait and see. Just as the primordial god tree was about to speak, he suddenly looked up into the horizon. 3 powerful auras were slowly pressing down from the horizon. The primordial god tree narrowed his eyes, and a fierce light flashed through them. He was about to attack but was stopped by the old man. The old man smiled. Let's talk. At this moment, Master Cloud, Tribulation Lord, and a beautiful woman appeared in front of the 2. The beautiful woman sized up the old man and smiled. I presume you are the patriarch of the primal god race, Primordial Yuan? The old man smiled. The beautiful woman faintly smiled. Patriarch Yuan, my immortal mausoleum has no grudge with your primal god race, so I don't think there's any need for such displeasure. What do you think? Primordial Yuan nodded. I think so too. The beautiful woman looked at Primordial Yuan, her smile still on her face. Then I asked Patriarch Yuan to hand over those 4 people. I will be eternally grateful. Primordial Yuan thought for a moment and then said, we made a deal with that youth. 3 days. 3 days from now he will leave. 3 days. The beautiful woman's eyes narrowed. Patriarch Primordial Yuan, what do you mean by this? Primordial Yuan smiled. I don't mean anything else. I just hope that you can wait 3 days. 3 days from now that youth will leave. At that time you can resolve the matter between you and him. We won't interfere at all. The beautiful woman chuckled. Patriarch Primordial Yuan, are you joking with me? Primordial Yuan laughed. If you think it's impossible, then let's fight. Fight. The beautiful woman's smile gradually turned cold. Patriarch Primordial Yuan, those 4 people are useless to you, but they are extremely useful to us. We must obtain those 4 people. Immemorial Yuan said with a smile. Sir, I just said that we made a deal with them. 3 days later they will leave this place. As for the grudge between you and them, my primal god race has no interest in interfering. Of course, if you aren't willing to wait 3 days, then you can attack now. However, I must remind you that with your strength, if you want to fight me, then you will likely be beaten to death by me. The beautiful woman's complexion suddenly turned ugly. Primordial Yuan. The beautiful woman didn't attack. The person in front of her wasn't from the same era as her. This person was once the powerful patriarch of the primal god race. His strength was definitely above hers. At this time, Primordial Yuan said again, 3 days. Just 3 days. Although my primal god race has declined, can the immortal mausoleum not give us face? The beautiful woman pondered for a moment and said, all right, I'll give you 3 days. With that, she turned and left. Primordial Yuan looked at the horizon and faintly smiled. Outside. The beautiful woman's complexion was extremely ugly. Master Yun said in a low voice, there's something fishy about this. The Calamity Lord nodded. It's very strange. Logically speaking, the primal god race has no reason to help them. But, as he spoke up to hear, he looked at the beautiful woman. Revered Mist, can we not give them 3 days? The beautiful woman was silent for a moment and said, the primal god race cannot be underestimated. As he spoke, he turned and said in a soft voice, 3 days, we'll give them 3 days. I want to see what they can do in 3 days. 1 day later. Inside the primordial hall. A terrifying aura suddenly appeared. Someone had broken through. In the corner, Yi Xian opened his eyes and looked into the distance. When he saw the person who had broken through, he was stunned. It wasn't Dao Ling or Shi Tian. It was Tianqi. He broke through just like that? Yi Xian and the other 2 were stunned. In the distance, Tianqi suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian. Meat, a lot of meat, Yi Xian. P.S. I'm going to study this month. What a pain in the ass. I've been working hard to save up manuscripts. I won't ask for votes this month. I'm too ashamed to ask for votes. I'm too ashamed. Every time I ask for votes at the end, my conscience will condemn me. Chapter 2256. Yi Xian was speechless. Could this fellow have cultivated to transcend time so quickly because he wanted to eat meat? Needless to say, Yi Xian was quite shocked at this moment. Transcend time. Tianqi had actually used such a short period of time to reach transcend time. That wasn't just an ordinary level of terrifying. It wasn't normal. Meanwhile, Primeval Yuan appeared here. He glanced at Tianqi and said softly, his heart is very simple. The simpler it is, the faster his cultivation will be. Yi Xian fell silent. At this moment he recalled something Qin Guan had once said. There are no obstacles to cultivation. It's the human heart that is too complicated and has too many thoughts. That's why there are obstacles to cultivation. Obviously, Tianqi's heart was very simple and pure. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He took out a roasted leg of lamb and handed it to Tianqi. Tianqi was overjoyed and took a bite. Meanwhile, Primeval Yuan suddenly said, all of you should speed up as well. There are only 2 more days left. Yi Xian nodded. The inheritances continued. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground while the countless inheritances of the primeval race flashed through his mind. Time. Time was the passing of time. Was it the past? Strictly speaking, it was. The river of time was the product of the accumulation of time over a long period of time. Was it difficult to transcend time? Of course it was. Because one had to gain complete control of the river of time before they could transcend time. Fortunately, there were many cultivation techniques within those inheritances. These ancient cultivation techniques could allow them to grasp the river of time quickly. At this moment, Yi Xian sighed with emotion. Independent cultivators couldn't compare to such extraordinary powers at all. Such extraordinary powers had their own inheritances. Many realms were as difficult as ascending to the heavens in the outside world, but they had extremely detailed cultivation techniques here. It was so detailed that it made one's scalp go numb. Just like the old saying, what you need to spend your entire life pondering and pursuing is something others are born with. There was no comparison at all. Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about it. He started to focus on controlling the river of time. As he studied the river of time, a thought suddenly arose in Yi Xian's mind. Why transcend time? Why couldn't it fuse with time? Without detachment, I am both for the years. Thinking of this, Yi Xian decided to give it a try. But soon Yi Xian was a little depressed. It was because he discovered that he couldn't merge with the river of time at all. The other party didn't care about him at all. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly missed the green profound sword. If it was the green profound sword, it would definitely fuse with him. However, Yi Xian did not intend to give up. After a short moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly said, "River of Time, I know you're intelligent. Since you're intelligent, can we talk?" No response. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "According to my understanding, even though you're time, you're not absolutely safe. There are countless great experts in this world that can destroy you, right?" There was still no response. Yi Xian continued, "You should have met my younger sister, right? Time, if you fuse with me, your fate will be tied to mine. As long as I don't die, no one can destroy you. In other words, if you choose to fuse with me, my backer will be your backer." Still no response. Yi Xian smiled slightly. "Since you're unwilling, then forget it." Before he could finish speaking, Yi Xian suddenly discovered that the river of time around him suddenly trembled. In the next moment, the river of time actually took the initiative to fuse with him. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was overjoyed. Damn it. It actually worked. Actually, he had just wanted to fool it casually, but he hadn't expected it to actually succeed. Life was really full of surprises. Wonderful. Yi Xian hurriedly took the initiative to fuse with the river of time. When he took the initiative to fuse with the river of time, Yi Xian was shocked to the extreme. He was like a tiny fish, and the river of time was like a vast ocean. Only when he entered the ocean did he realize how tiny he was compared to the river of time. Transcend time? Yi Xian suddenly discovered a problem. The so-called transcending time didn't mean surpassing the flow of time. It meant that the other party wasn't bound by the flow of time. In front of the river of time, the other party was still very tiny. This was because the power of time was everywhere. Transcending was not surpassing it. Just like a fish in the sea, if it left the sea, it could also be said that it had transcended the sea, but it couldn't be said that it was more amazing than the sea. Thinking of this, Yi Xian suddenly became enlightened. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. He began to earnestly fuse with the river of time. Like this, the third day passed. In the grand hall, Dao Ling and Shirtian suddenly opened their eyes at the same time. A terrifying aura erupted from their bodies, but this aura was instantly retracted by the two. The two looked at each other and then laughed. Transcending time. With the help of the primal god race ancestors, they had directly transcended time. As if thinking of something, the two turned to look at Yi Xian not too far away. At this time, Yi Xian was still quietly sitting, like an old monk in meditation. Both of them frowned. He still hasn't broken through? Right at this moment, Primeval Yuan suddenly said, "How do the two of you feel now?" Dao Ling grinned, "I feel like I'm invincible." Ah. Primeval Yuan shook his head and smiled, "It's very normal. When I transcended time for the first time, I was very arrogant as well." Dao Ling said in a low voice, "Senior, my brother Yi." Primeval Yuan glanced at Yi Xian and fell silent. Dao Ling and Shirtian exchanged glances, and they were both slightly puzzled. Why hasn't he broken through? Right at this moment, Primeval Yuan suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, time's up." Yi Xian didn't reply. Primeval Yuan's expression froze. This little fellow isn't trying to act shamelessly, right? Dao Ling hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior, he might be at a critical moment. Can you give him a little more time?" Primeval Yuan was about to speak when a voice suddenly resounded from outside, Patriarch Primeval, 3 days are up. Primeval Yuan fell silent. Time's up. Primeval Yuan gazed at Yi Xian, but Yi Xian still didn't reply. Dao Ling intended to say something when Shi Tian spoke abruptly. Senior, the 3 of you as brothers will go stop them and allow Brother Yi to stay here and continue cultivating. What do you think? Primeval Yuan fell silent. Shi Tian spoke abruptly, we'll take Yi Xian out. As he spoke, he bowed deeply to Primeval Yuan. We 4 brothers will definitely remember what the primeval race has done for us today. If the primeval race needs anything in the future, we 4 brothers will definitely do our best to help. Senior, we'll meet again. As soon as he finished speaking, he took Yi Xian with him and left. Dao Ling bowed slightly and then he turned around and left as well. Tian Qi glanced at Primeval Yuan, and then he withdrew a piece of roasted meat. He stuffed it into Primeval Yuan's hand, and then he turned around and ran. Primeval Yuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he gazed at the roasted meat in his hand. The primeval god tree spoke in a low voice, Patriarch. Primeval Yuan said softly, we can only help them this much. If we continue to help, we'll have to face the immortal mausoleum head-on. If it was in the past, even if we have to face the immortal mausoleum head-on, I wouldn't hesitate. But now. As he spoke, he shook his head, we've already declined. If we really face the immortal mausoleum head-on, us old fellows don't matter, but what about our clansmen who are hiding in the dark? As he spoke, he looked into the distance and said softly, our abilities are limited. Even if we have good karma, we have to stop. The primeval god tree nodded, I understand. As if he thought of something, he suddenly looked outside, then what about young Master Yi? After a long silence, Primeval Yuan said, I'm also very puzzled. As he spoke, he looked outside, I hope they can get through this. Otherwise, our investment will be wasted. Outside. The moment Dao Ling, Shi Tian and Tian Qi brought Yi Xian out, they were locked onto by 3 terrifying auras. It was Master Yun, Culpa Lord and Supreme Mist. Supreme Mist looked at Dao Ling and the other 2 with a calm expression. The Culpa Lord's gaze fell on Yi Xian with an unfriendly expression. Supreme Mist sized up Dao Ling and the other 2. In the next moment, a cold light flashed in his eyes, transcend time. Hearing this, Master Yun and the Culpa Lord's expressions instantly turned ugly. These 3 actually transcended time in such a short period of time? Supreme Mist looked at the primeval god palace in the distance and her expression was terrifyingly gloomy. She naturally knew that the reason these people could transcend time in such a short period of time was because of the primeval god race. Otherwise, Yi Xian and the others definitely couldn't transcend time in such a short period of time. At this moment, the Culpa Lord suddenly pointed at Yi Xian in the distance and said, he doesn't seem to have broken through. Supreme Mist retracted her gaze and looked at Yi Xian in the distance. She frowned, he hasn't broken through. Below, Dao Ling suddenly smiled, everyone, can we talk? Supreme Mist looked at Dao Ling, talk about what? Dao Ling smiled, what do you think of the 4 of us? Supreme Mist's expression was calm, what do you want to say? Dao Ling said seriously, don't you think we are very outstanding? Forgive me for being blunt, but there are no more outstanding geniuses and monsters than us 4 brothers. You guys are targeting us. If we take revenge on you in the future when we grow up, won't you guys be in trouble? Supreme Mist nodded, it will indeed be troublesome. Dao Ling hurriedly said, so, why are you guys targeting us? Now, if you apologize to us and compensate us with something, the grudge between us will be over. What do you think? Supreme Mist looked at Dao Ling, are you trying to trick me? Dao Ling, Supreme Mist said again, you're right. If you guys really grow up, you can indeed bring us a lot of trouble. So, we have to kill you before you guys grow up. As she said this, she looked at Dao Ling, thank you for your reminder. Kill. As her voice fell, Master Yun, who was beside her, dashed out. At the side, Dao Ling's expression froze. Shi Tian sighed softly, you idiot. If you don't have a brain like Brother Yi, don't try to trick us. Dao Ling. 7017K. Chapter 2257. At the instant that Master Yun charged over, a vicious look flashed through Tian Qi's eyes. In the next moment he charged at Master Yun. Bang! An explosion resounded in the sky, and then both Master Yun and Tian Qi retreated explosively at the same time. The 2 of them retreated several tens of thousands of feet away. After Master Yun stopped moving, he gazed at Tian Qi with a wisp of a solemn expression in his eyes, and he was shocked. What a terrifying physical strength. Venerable Mist suddenly said, "He's a demon beast. Watch out." Master Yun nodded slightly, and then he vanished on the spot. Space suddenly split apart. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Tianqi's eyes, and then he clenched his right fist and punched forward. Rumble. A huge explosion resounded, and then the heavens and the earth were blasted apart. This time, Tianqi retreated by almost 300 kilometers, and he just stopped when the space behind him collapsed into pieces. Master Yun gazed at Tianqi with a calm expression. Again. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged at Tianqi. Tianqi clenched his right fist tightly, and then he shot into the sky and smashed against Master Yun. He was going head-on against him. On the other side, Dao Ling glanced at Venerable Mist and the Tribulation Lord, and then he said, "Brother Tian, who do you choose?" Shi Tian immediately pointed at the Tribulation Lord. Dao Ling's face froze. Everyone could discern that Venerable Mist was even more terrifying. Shi Tian glanced at Yi Xian, who was still meditating in the distance, and then he said, "That Tribulation Lord's gaze has been fixed on Brother Yi. Obviously he intends to kill Brother Yi. Be careful." Dao Ling nodded, and then he gazed at Venerable Mist. "Do you want to fight me? If you don't want to fight me, you can fight my brother Tian." Shi Tian was speechless. Venerable Mist stared at Dao Ling. "I want to fight you." Dao Ling was puzzled. "Why?" Venerable Mist's expression was calm. "I hate flashy people. So, I want to beat you to death." As she spoke, she suddenly vanished on the spot. Dao Ling's pupils constricted, and then he pressed his palms together. In an instant, an all-manifestation Dharma body that was over 30 kilometers long appeared behind him. He didn't dare act carelessly or underestimate such a terrifying Venerable Mist. Dao Ling suddenly roared, "Die!" As soon as he finished speaking, he slammed his right palm down. Boom. Behind him, the Dharma body, which was tens of thousands of meters tall, suddenly slammed its palm down. Boom. Wherever the giant palm passed, the space would burn and be annihilated. Revered Mist watched the palm strike with a calm expression. She flicked her sleeve. Boom. The enormous palm was directly shattered. At the same time, Dao Ling retreated explosively for over 100 kilometers, and the all-creation Dharma body behind him had already vanished. Dao Ling was a little confused. Damn it. I was beaten up right after transcending time? Dao Ling looked at Venerable Mist in the distance. Venerable Mist's expression was calm. A Dharma body of all creations. Why are you still playing with such a low-level thing? How could you entrust your power to the Dharmakaya? What are you thinking? Dao Ling took a deep look at Supreme Mist, then turned to look at Shi Tian. Shi Tian's eyelid twitched. "Don't look at me. I want to follow Lord Robber." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged towards the Tribulation Lord. Dao Ling's expression froze. The Culpa Lord's face remained emotionless when he saw Shi Tian charge over, but his gaze was terrifyingly icy cold. Actually, he wasn't much weaker than Supreme Mist and Master Yun in the past. The reason why he was so weak now was because Qingguan had destroyed his myriad calamity body. When he thought of this, he felt his heart ache. All calamity body. All calamity body. He had cultivated for tens of thousands of years to achieve it. Yet that woman had beaten him into nothingness. When he thought of that woman, his scalp went numb. The Culpa Lord didn't think too much about it and charged towards Shi Tian. In an instant, countless tribulation lightning appeared in the surroundings. Shi Tian didn't dare to be careless when facing the Culpa Lord. In the battle, the one who suffered the most was Dao Ling. When he fought against Supreme Mist, he was simply taking a beating. At this moment, he didn't even have the strength to fight back. He could only passively take a beating. Tianqi was also being suppressed by Master Yun. Although Tianqi's body was extremely terrifying, his combat style was too simple. He was at a disadvantage when facing an expert of Master Yun's level. However, Master Yun couldn't do anything to Tianqi for the time being, because Tianqi's body was too terrifying. In particular, he still had the primal god armor that the primal god race had given him. When Shi Tian fought with the Culpa Lord, he was also suppressed by the Culpa Lord. After all, he had just transcended time and couldn't compare with a powerhouse of the Culpa Lord's level. And the one who suffered the most was Dao Ling. He was simply being beaten up. In the distance in the Grand Hall, the Primal God Tree said softly, "They aren't a match for Supreme Mist's group of 3. Primal Yuan was silent. The Primal God Tree said in a low voice, "In at most a quarter of an hour, Dao Ling will be killed by Supreme Mist. Once Dao Ling is killed, then neither Shi Tian nor Tianqi will live." Primal Yuan looked at Yi Xian, who was still sitting in the distance. It was unknown what he was thinking. The primal god tree shook its head. Even if Yi Xian makes a breakthrough now, it is meaningless. Even if the four of them join forces, they still won't be a match for Supreme Mist's group of three. After a moment of silence, Primal Yuan said softly, "That will depend on their own good fortune." The primal god tree said in a low voice, "Are we really not going to help?" Primal Yuan smiled bitterly. "What can we do to help? If we help, it means that we will be waging war against the immortal mausoleum. How can the current us resist the immortal mausoleum?" The primal god tree sighed. The current primal god race indeed didn't have the ability to contend with the immortal mausoleum. At this moment, Primal Yuan looked up at the distant horizon and said softly, "It might be over." Bang! In the distant starry skies, the starry skies suddenly exploded. In the next moment, a figure frantically retreated. It was Dao Ling. Dao Ling had retreated hundreds of thousands of feet. After Dao Ling stopped, a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. In the distance, Supreme Mist looked at Dao Ling with a calm expression. "You don't seem to be much." Dao Ling wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the distant Supreme Mist and slowly closed his eyes. He opened his hands and in the next moment, a divine stone appeared between his eyebrows. Primal God Stone. Suddenly the space around Dao Ling trembled. Dao Ling slowly clenched his right hand. In the next moment he suddenly soared into the sky. In an instant the starry skies boiled. With the help of the primal god stone, a Wanxiang avatar that was hundreds of thousands of feet long appeared behind him. The moment this Wanxiang avatar appeared, a terrifying pressure instantly swept across the entire starry skies. Then, the starry skies within a radius of millions of miles trembled violently as if there was an earthquake. It was incomparably terrifying. In the distance, Supreme Mist looked at Dao Ling with a calm expression. The source of power comes from within, not from outside. Dao Ling suddenly turned his head and looked at Yi Xian who was sitting quietly below. He said in a trembling voice, "Brother Yi, how much longer do you need? Give me a definite answer." Yi Xian was silent. Dao Ling's expression froze. He didn't say anything else. He suddenly leaped up and directly fused with the Wanxiang avatar behind him. Boom. In an instant, the Wanxiang avatar violently trembled. In an instant, a terrifying aura directly locked onto Supreme Mist in the distance. Supreme Mist frowned slightly. At this moment she finally felt a little dangerous. Supreme Mist stared at Dao Ling. "You're overexerting yourself." In the starry skies, Dao Ling took a deep breath. He was indeed overexerting himself. He had no choice but to do so. If he didn't do so, he wouldn't be a match for Supreme Mist at all. He had to buy some time for Yi Xian. Dao Ling collected his thoughts. He looked at Supreme Mist in the distance and a ferocious glint flashed in his eyes. In the next moment he directly disappeared on the spot. Boom. The Wanxiang avatar that was hundreds of thousands of feet long swept across the starry skies and directly collided with Supreme Mist. The powerful force seemed to be able to crush this part of the universe. It was extremely terrifying. In the distance, Supreme Mist squinted her eyes. She suddenly opened her right hand and gently swept it forward. The space-time suddenly split open. A black light suddenly shot into the sky and met the Wanxiang avatar. Rumble. In the blink of an eye, the ray of black light was obliterated, and the enormous all-elephant's Dharma body trembled violently before it exploded into pieces. A strand of terrifying energy suddenly erupted from the battlefield. Rumble. Supreme Mist retreated explosively for thousands of feet while Dao Ling retreated for hundreds of thousands of feet. As soon as he stopped, he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. He was extremely weak. In the distance, Supreme Mist glanced at Dao Ling with a trace of seriousness in her eyes. Needless to say, the person before her was indeed monstrous. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for him to challenge her at a higher level. After all, she, Supreme Mist, was once a monstrous person. Challenging others at a higher level was a common occurrence. How could others challenge her at a higher level? How difficult would that be? However, this Dao Ling before her could fight her. In the distance, Dao Ling wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and then grinned. One more time. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up. In the starry skies, he suddenly put his palms together. In an instant, hundreds of illusory figures appeared behind him. He suddenly slammed his palms down, and dozens of illusory figures slammed down simultaneously. In the distance, Supreme Mist was expressionless. She suddenly flicked her sleeves. With this movement, the entire starry skies seemed to be lifted up. Rumble. In an instant, a terrifying power swept through the starry skies. Dao Ling was directly thrown hundreds of thousands of feet away by this terrifying power. As soon as he stopped, his physical body was immediately destroyed. Not only that, but his soul also became extremely illusory. That strike just now almost directly obliterated his soul. Dao Ling turned his head and looked into the distance. At that moment, Tianqi and Shitian were already being suppressed. Dao Ling then looked at Yi Xian, who was sitting quietly in the distance. He said softly, "Brother Yi, if you still don't wake up, we can only be brothers in our next lives." In the distance, Supreme Mist was expressionless. Even if he wakes up now, what can he do? As she spoke, she slowly clenched her right hand. A terrifying power suddenly condensed in her right hand. Dao Ling took a deep breath and said softly, "Brother Yi, tell me honestly, are you already awake?" Yi Xian did not reply. Dao Ling said with a trembling voice, "Brother Yi, let's not joke around. Hurry up and get up. If you still don't get up, we'll all be killed." Yi Xian still did not reply. Dao Ling still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian suddenly stood up. Seeing this, Dao Ling was overjoyed. "Brother Yi?" Yi Xian glanced at the horizon and said softly, "I understand." After that he turned and left. Dao Ling was stunned. Then he said, "Brother Yi, where are you going?" Yi Xian did not even turn his head. "I'm going to cultivate in seclusion. Brother Dao Ling, help me hold them off for another 3 days. 3 days later, I'll come back and find you." After he finished speaking, he had already disappeared. Dao Ling's face instantly turned pale. 3 days later, come back and collect my corpse. P.S. Those with tickets, please give me a nod. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2258. Did he really leave? Seeing Yi Xian disappear, Dao Ling was dumbfounded as if he was struck by lightning. From afar, Venerable Mist sneered, "This is the person you want to protect with your life?" As she said that, her pupils suddenly contracted. She turned around and blocked with her arm. Boom. A wave of sword light suddenly erupted from her arm. Kaboom. Venerable Mist retreated tens of thousands of feet away. As soon as she stopped, a shadow suddenly appeared. It wasn't Yi Xian but Dao Ling who was beside her. A fist flew towards Venerable Mist's face. Venerable Mist's eyes flashed with hostility. She flicked her sleeves. Kaboom. In front of her, time and space collapsed and was destroyed. At that moment, a sword ray appeared behind her without any warning. Venerable Mist's body suddenly shook and she appeared tens of thousands of feet away. A sword slashed through the air. After Venerable Mist stopped, she lifted her head and looked at Yi Xian, who was tens of thousands of feet away. Sneak attack? From afar, Yi Xian smiled faintly. Yes. Venerable Mist looked at Yi Xian. You are a swordsman. Don't you think it's shameful to do this? Yi Xian asked back, You have such a high realm but you bully us. Don't you think it's shameful? Venerable Mist smiled faintly. You have a glib tongue. As soon as she said that, she suddenly pointed at Yi Xian from afar. Boom. A fingerprint suddenly swept across the field and hit Yi Xian. From afar, Yi Xian unsheathed his sword and slashed. Kaboom. The fingerprint shattered immediately. Seeing that, Venerable Mist frowned slightly. You haven't transcended time. Yi Xian smiled faintly. Transcended time? Only ordinary people like you would cultivate realms. I, Yi Xian, don't cultivate realms, understand? Venerable Mist looked at Yi Xian. Don't cultivate realms? Are you kidding me? Yi Xian was just about to speak when Shitian suddenly said from the side, Brother Yi, let's not chat for now. Can you deal with that woman first and then come back to help? Yi Xian glanced at Shitian. At this moment, Shitian was being suppressed by the Tribulation Lord, and many parts of Shitian's body had been charred by lightning. He was in a rather miserable state. Only Tianqi was slightly better. His physical body was simply too terrifying. Even though Yun Shi was suppressing him, he was unable to do anything to him. Yi Xian retracted his gaze and looked at Venerable Mist in the distance. Venerable Mist smiled and said, He's right. If you want to save them, you have to get rid of me first. Yi Xian suddenly turned his head to look at Dao Ling, who was next to him. What are you looking at? Go and heal your wounds first. Dao Ling was stunned for a moment before he hurriedly nodded. All right. Brother Yi, you can do it. With that, he turned around and vanished into the distance. Yi Xian looked at Supreme Mist in silence. Kill this woman? That wasn't very realistic. Even though he'd fused completely with the River of Time, He hadn't learned how to fully control it. So, he was only barely able to resist this woman. But if this continued, then Shirtian and Tianqi would be in danger. Risking his life? If risking his life was of any use, then he would definitely do so. But the problem was that he couldn't kill this woman even if he risked his life. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he opened his palm. The Dark Heaven token appeared in his hand, and he activated it. In the next moment, the masked old man appeared in front of him. The masked old man was instantly shocked when he saw Supreme Mist and the others. He gazed at Yi Xian and spoke with a trembling voice, "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian grinned. "Don't be nervous. I didn't ask you to come and help me fight." The masked old man was still very nervous. He'd never really believed Yi Xian's words. Yi Xian said, "Issue a warrant for my arrest. I'll give you 1,000,000 universe veins if you're able to kill this woman in front of me." The masked old man hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Young Master Yi, I can issue this warrant for you. But the condition is that you really have 1,000,000 universe veins." As he spoke, he paused for a moment and continued, "You have to. Otherwise, it'll affect my immortal treasure pavilion greatly." Yi Xian smiled, "You think I don't have it?" The masked old man hurriedly shook his head. "I absolutely didn't mean that. It's just a rule." Yi Xian tapped with his finger, and a spatial ring descended to the masked old man. There were 1,000,000 universe veins within the spatial ring. After the masked old man put the spatial ring away, he said, "Young Master Yi, wait a moment." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished. In the distance, Supreme Mist laughed with ridicule. 1,000,000 universe veins? Kill me? Yi Xian, I really suspect that there's something wrong with your head. Yi Xian's expression was calm. Meanwhile, the masked old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he said in a low voice, "Young Master Yi, someone contacted me. I need at least 3,000,000 universe veins to kill this woman." 3,000,000. Yi Xian frowned. He didn't think too much about it and he just turned around to look at Dao Ling and Shirtian. "Hand over the universe veins." Shirtian and Dao Ling didn't hesitate at all. They hurriedly teleported over to Yi Xian, and then Yi Xian placed 2 spatial rings in the masked old man's hand. The masked old man immediately turned around and left. In the distance, Supreme Mist frowned slightly. "You actually have so many universe veins." As she spoke, she slowly clenched her right fist. Right at this moment, her pupils constricted and she swiftly turned around and punched. Rumble. The space in front of Supreme Mist suddenly exploded apart, and then she retreated explosively for over 100 kilometers. Meanwhile, an afterimage charged towards her. It was a majestic sight. In the distance, Supreme Mist was shocked and she didn't dare to be careless. She opened her palm, and an umbrella suddenly appeared in her hand. In the next moment, she opened the umbrella and pushed it forward. A palm suddenly slammed against the umbrella. Rumble. The umbrella suddenly exploded, and Supreme Mist, who was behind it, instantly retreated hundreds of thousands of meters away. As soon as she stopped, the galaxy behind her was directly destroyed, and at the same time, the remnant shadow had already dashed in front of her. Their speed was simply too fast. It was so fast that even Yi Xian wasn't able to accurately capture its trajectory. It was simply terrifying. In the distance, Supreme Mist's expression instantly changed when she saw the afterimage charge in front of her. It was too fast. She suddenly clenched her fists tightly, and a terrifying force swept out from within her. Rumble. With Supreme Mist at the center, the surroundings suddenly exploded, and a terrifying pressure and force instantly swept through the starry sky. Bang. An afterimage suddenly retreated madly in the starry sky. It was Supreme Mist. As she retreated, the afterimage appeared above her again, and then he suddenly stomped down. Rumble. Supreme Mist fell straight down from the starry sky. In an instant, she smashed into the ground, and then an enormous abyss appeared there. However, in the next moment, Supreme Mist charged out from within the abyss. But she'd only just emerged when the afterimage appeared above her again, and then he stomped down again. Rumble. Supreme Mist was stomped down into the bottomless abyss once more. Meanwhile, Master Yun suddenly stopped in the starry sky, and then he turned around and charged towards the black shadow. Obviously, he wanted to relieve the pressure on Supreme Mist. The black shadow suddenly turned around and smashed his fist forward. Rumble. In an instant, Yun Shi was sent flying more than 100,000 zhang away. As soon as he stopped, his body split apart and blood sprayed out. Master Yun was slightly stunned. So terrifying? Master Yun gazed at the figure in the distance, and his voice trembled as he said, "Who exactly are you? Do you know that we're from the Immortal Mausoleum?" The figure in the distance paid no attention to him, and he charged down towards the abyss. Obviously he intended to kill Supreme Mist. Yi Xian suddenly gazed at Tianqi. Tianqi, let's attack together. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged towards Master Yun. He was overjoyed when he saw that Master Yun was injured. Now that Supreme Mist was busy, it was the best opportunity for him to kill both Master Yun and the Tribulation Lord. Yi Xian was extremely swift, and a ray of light shot towards Master Yun. On the other hand, Tianqi had charged towards Master Yun as well when he heard Yi Xian. Master Yun's expression instantly changed when he saw Yi Xian and Tianqi charge towards him. He was quite fearful of Yi Xian and Tianqi. Especially Yi Xian because he'd actually been able to fight Supreme Mist for so long just now. Moreover, he was heavily injured right now. Master Yin didn't hesitate to turn around and flee. He was extremely swift, and he instantly vanished into the ends of the starry sky. Yi Xian and Tianqi were stunned when they witnessed this scene. He fled just like that? Yi Xian suddenly turned around to look at the Tribulation Lord in the distance. The Tribulation Lord had escaped the battle and vanished into the starry sky as soon as Supreme Mist fled. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened when he witnessed this scene. Damn it. These fellows flee when they can't win. They really don't have any backbone. As if he'd thought of something, Yi Xian looked towards the abyss below, and he was slightly puzzled. Is Supreme Mist dead? Right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. It was exactly that figure from before. Yi Xian gazed at the figure while he became vigilant in his heart. Even if it was standing right in front of him, he wouldn't be able to see its true appearance. The figure suddenly said, "She fled." Yi Xian frowned slightly. I actually allowed her to flee. Meanwhile, the masked old man appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he returned 3 million universe veins to Yi Xian. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he withdrew 500,000 universe veins and passed them to the figure. This is for you. The figure gazed at Yi Xian. There's no need for that. I won't take a single cent from you if you don't complete the mission. Yi Xian grinned. This is your reward. The figure fell silent for a moment before he said, My principles. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and vanished into the horizon. Principles. Yi Xian gazed towards the depths of the starry sky and spoke softly, Senior, who is he? The masked old man replied, You've met him. Yi Xian spoke solemnly, The God of Forgiveness? The masked old man nodded. Yi Xian was quite curious, What's his background? The masked old man shook his head, I don't know. In any case, he's very mysterious. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I want all the information about the immortal tomb. The masked old man was slightly hesitant. Yi Xian smiled, Is it very difficult? The masked old man hurriedly shook his head, No. As he spoke, he took out a scroll and passed it to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, I didn't hesitate just now because I didn't want to hurt young Master Yi. The Culpa Lord and the others aren't scary, but the immortal tomb behind them is scary, and the strength of the immortal tomb? Yi Xian glanced at the masked old man. I hate it when people talk to me about the people behind them. I have people behind me, but am I too arrogant? As he spoke, he snorted coldly. They should be glad that I, Yi Xian, don't want to be a backer. Otherwise, I'd fucking rely on the entire universe to death. Do you believe me? The masked old man hesitated and said, Young Master Yi, this old man has one more thing to say. Bragging isn't a very good thing. Don't brag. Yi Xian spoke seriously, I'm not bragging this time. The masked old man nodded, I understand. Yi Xian, you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.